Hey there, tonight we're diving into the siege that turned the tides of history. The fall of Constantinople, 1453, not the fairy tale of impenetrable walls you'd expect, but a harsh reality where a mighty cannon and a young sultan wrote the final chapter of an ancient empire. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. In the spring of 1453, the city of Constantinople was like a once glamorous Hollywood star, now living in a rundown mansion. It had all the grandeur of the Byzantine Empire packed into its streets, but the glitter had faded, and the neighbors weren't just curious, they were ravenous. This city, once the crown jewel of Christendom, the crossroad of Europe and Asia, was now a shadow of its former self, desperately clinging to its past glories, while surrounded by a geopolitical storm that promised to blow it all away. Constantinople was strategically vital, like the last piece of cake at a party full of hungry guests. It was the gateway between the East and the West, and its walls, the famous Theodosian walls, were legendary. Built in the 5th century, these bad boys stretched nearly 14 miles and had withstood sieges since bricks were cool. But by 1453, they were showing their age, a bit like an ancient celebrity with one too many facelifts. Emperor Constantine Roman XI, the last ruler of the Byzantine Empire, knew he was in a pickle. His empire was reduced to the city itself and a few outlying territories. With a population of about 50,000, down from 1 million in its heyday, Constantinople was more skeletal than substantial. Yet, Constantine wasn't about to roll over and let the Ottomans have it all without a fight. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the Sultan on the doorstep, named Roman II. This guy was the embodiment of ambition with a side of unyielding determination. Just 21 years old, Maimed was not the kind of ruler who collected stamps or dabbled in painting. No, he was out for legacy, and he had his eyes set on Constantinople like a kid in a candy store. Known as the Conqueror, Maimed had been preparing for this moment like a boxer eyeing the heavyweight title. His empire, the Ottoman Empire, was growing faster than a teenage boy, and Constantinople was smack dab in the middle of his grand plans. The political scene was messy, a bit like a chess match where everyone's playing by different rules. The Byzantines were isolated, with their traditional allies either too busy or too scared to lend a hand. Western Europe, embroiled in its own feuds, and the odd bit of plague, was largely indifferent. Pope Nicholas V had called for help, but let's just say the response was underwhelming. Meanwhile, the Ottomans were consolidating power, and Maimed had managed to unite his forces with the precision of a military parade. Constantine Roman XI tried to rally his people and prepare for the inevitable siege. He was a leader in a tough spot, defending a city with scant resources. His pleas for aid were like sending a text and seeing those dreaded 3 darts that never result in a reply. Yet, there were some who answered the call. Enter Giovanni Giustiniani, a Genos mercenary captain with a penchant for fortifications. Giustiniani brought with him 700 men, a small but fierce force eager to defend the city. It was as if a few well-trained bodyguards had shown up at the last minute to fend off a horde of invaders. Meanwhile, Maimed was preparing his forces with meticulous care. His army was a diverse mix of warriors from across his empire, numbering around 80,000. Talk about bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. He also had another trick up his sleeve: artillery. The Ottomans had some serious firepower, including the famous Basilica, a massive cannon capable of hurling a 600-pound stone ball over a mile. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a cruise missile, but with more smoke and less precision. The stage was set for a showdown that would determine the fate of Constantinople and shape the future of Europe and Asia. It was a battle between an ancient city clinging to its storied past and a burgeoning empire eager to make its mark on history. The tension was palpable, the stakes impossibly high. As the sun rose on April 6, 1453, the Ottomans began their siege, and the fate of Constantinople hung in the balance, like a tightrope walker on a windy day. while the sun crept up on April 6, 1453, illuminating the golden domes and weary walls of Constantinople, maimed Roman II was busy playing the ultimate game of risk. The Ottomans weren't just knocking on the door. They were about to kick it in with a medieval battering ram named Basilica. This wasn't your everyday cannon. Oh no, it was the hulk of artillery, a 27-foot-long behemoth that could launch 600-pound stones like they were pebbles in a pond. It's the kind of weapon that makes you wonder if the phrase overkill was coined around this time. Now, Maimed's sharping list for this siege was longer than a kid's Christmas list. We're talking about a fleet of over 100 ships. Yes, you heard right, crammed with soldiers, supplies, and enough firepower to make even the most fortified city shake in its boots. His army of approximately 80,000 was like a well-oiled machine, ready to grind down the Byzantine defenses. Meanwhile, inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine Roman XI was counting every sword he had. Roughly 7,000 soldiers, including a few hundred Italian mercenaries, courtesy of Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese captain who decided he'd rather be part of history than read about it. You might be wondering, how could Maimed afford such a grand spectacle? Well, the Ottoman war chest wasn't just some piggy bank filled with coins. It was a treasure trove amassed from a burgeoning empire that stretched its influence across the Balkans, Anatolia, and beyond. The Ottomans were economic powerhouses, trading across continents like they were running the first-ever global marketplace. They had the kind of revenue stream that could make a modern-day CEO drool. As for the defenders, they were relying heavily on the legendary Theodosian walls, those ancient stone guardians. Despite their impressive history, these walls were about as ready for the Basilica as a sandcastle is for a tsunami. Still, they were Constantinople's last best hope, and the defenders were betting on every brick, mortar, and prayer they could muster. It was a little like putting all your chips on red in a roulette game where the house, Maimed, had already rigged the wheel. The myth of Constantinople's impregnable walls was a story that had been told for centuries, and for a good reason. They had stood tall against countless sieges, including one by the infamous Attila the Hun. But by 1453, their aura of invincibility was more nostalgia than reality. Times had changed, and so had the art of war. The Byzantines were like a vintage car in a drag race against a fleet of sports cars. Charming, but not exactly designed for speed, or in this case, survival. Now, let's talk about the brains behind the Ottoman brawn. Maimed was no ordinary sultan. This guy was a student of war, a strategic mastermind who had done his homework. He knew that taking Constantinople would secure his legacy as the conqueror and transform the city into the jewel of his empire. He wasn't just thinking about the battle. He was envisioning an Ottoman capital that would eclipse even the grandest dreams of Rome. And Maimed had the foresight to surround himself with some of the best minds of his time. Engineers, architects, and military tacticians flocked to his court, eager to be part of this monumental undertaking. It was like assembling the Avengers of siege warfare, each bringing their expertise to the table. The Basilica cannon itself was the brainchild of a Hungarian engineer named Orban, who had defected to the Ottomans after the Byzantines couldn't afford his services. Talk about a missed opportunity. Constantine Roman XI, on the other hand, was left to make do with what he had, which wasn't much. His empire was a shadow of its former self, reduced to a few territories and a dwindling treasury. The economic disparity between the two sides was stark. While Maimed could fund a small war with pocket change, Constantine was more like a medieval Kickstarter campaign, hoping against hope for backers that never showed up. As the siege preparations ramped up, the atmosphere inside Constantinople was a mix of grim determination and quiet desperation. The people knew they were on the brink of something monumental, whether it was survival or destruction. They clung to their faith, their history, and each other, aware that they were living through the final chapters of a 1,000-year story. Yet, despite the odds, there was something undeniably romantic about this last stand. Perhaps it was the allure of fighting for an ancient legacy, or the sheer audacity of facing overwhelming odds with nothing but courage and a few well-placed stones. The defenders might have been outmatched, but they weren't about to write their own obituaries just yet. As the first cannonball from the Basilica thundered against the walls, the real siege of Constantinople began. It was a clash of old-world fortifications against new-world firepower, an epic showdown that would echo through history. Each day, the Ottomans tightened their grip, while the Byzantines dug in deeper, both sides aware that the fate of empires hung in the balance. With every passing moment, the tension ratcheted up a notch, and the city braced itself for the storm that was now battering its gates. As the dust settled from the first cannonball's impact, Constantinople became a pressure cooker of nerves and prayers, ready to boil over at any moment. Inside the city, the mood was a cocktail of anticipation, desperation, and a sprinkle of gallows humor. The citizens and defenders alike were caught in a bizarre mix of medieval warfare and soap opera drama, where every twist and turn could spell salvation or doom. On the front lines, the Ottomans were busy showing off their formidable firepower, with maimed Roman II playing conductor to an orchestra of artillery. The bombardment was relentless, like a drummer determined to break every skin in a rock concert. Meanwhile, the Byzantines found themselves in the role of the beleaguered audience, praying for an encore they could survive. The famed Theodosian walls, once the pride of the city, were now under siege from the very forces they were designed to repel. Each day saw new cracks and breaches, leaving the defenders scrambling like a soccer team without a goalie. While the walls were taking a pounding, the naval front was heating up in the Golden Horn. The Byzantines, with their motley crew of ships, faced off against the Ottoman fleet, which was about as subtle as a herd of stampeding elephants. Despite being outnumbered, the Byzantine sailors fought with the tenacity of cornered alley cats, relying on their intimate knowledge of the waters and a few well-placed fire ships to keep the Ottomans at bay. It was naval warfare with a touch of improvisation, where innovation was born out of necessity. But wait, there's more. Maimed, ever the strategic thinker, wasn't content with just a frontal assault. No, he had secret tunnels dug under the walls in an attempt to pull off a medieval version of Mission Impossible. Picture it, teams of engineers and miners digging away like industrious moles, hoping to pop up inside the city like a magician's rabbit. Unfortunately for Maimed, these operations were less Tom Cruise and more Three Stooges. Byzantine counterminers, with their ears pressed to the ground, were quick to intercept these would-be burrowers, leading to underground skirmishes that were more slapstick than strategic. Inside the city, the citizens of Constantinople were caught between the crossfire and their faith. Churches were packed with supplicants, their prayers mingling with the smoke from the ever-present bombardment. Yet, alongside the fervent appeals for divine intervention was a grim practicality. People were stockpiling food, water, and whatever makeshift weapons they could get their hands on. It was a community effort that ranged from the sublime to the absurd, with anything even vaguely throwable being thrown. Constantine Roman XI, the beleaguered emperor, was the embodiment of stoic resolve, rallying his troops and citizens alike with a mix of inspiring speeches and pragmatic decisions. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but he was determined to go down swinging rather than simply fade into obscurity. His resolve was mirrored by his ally, Giovanni Giustiniani, whose mercenaries became the backbone of the defense. Together, they were the last line between the city and the Ottoman onslaught, holding firm like a rock in a stormy sea. As the siege dragged on, the situation grew increasingly dire. Supplies dwindled, morale wavered, and the relentless noise of cannon fire became a constant, oppressive backdrop. Yet amidst the chaos, there were moments of unexpected levity. The Byzantines, stubborn as ever, took to taunting their besiegers with a mix of defiance and dark humor, shouting insults over the walls like a medieval Twitter feud. It was a small, rebellious act of resistance that underscored the indomitable spirit of a city refusing to go quietly into the night. Despite their best efforts, the Byzantine defenses were slowly but surely being chipped away. The basilica, that colossal cannon, was a symbol of the new era of warfare, one that the aging city was ill-prepared to face. The walls that had once stood as a testament to Byzantine ingenuity were now a crumbling relic, struggling to withstand the modern onslaught. It was a cruel twist of fate. A city defined by its resilience was being undone by the very advancements it had helped to inspire. The siege had become a race against time, with the Ottomans tightening their grip and the Byzantines racing to shore up their defenses. Each day brought new challenges and new stories of heroism, desperation, and ingenuity. From the daring naval engagements in the Golden Horn to the subterranean skirmishes beneath the city's surface, the siege was a tapestry of chaos and courage, woven together by the shared determination of those fighting for their homes and their history. Despite the romantic appeal of a last stand, the harsh reality was unavoidable. The Byzantine defenders were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. The walls, once thought impregnable, were proving to be more myth than reality, a sobering reminder of the relentless march of progress. Yet, even as the situation grew increasingly bleak, the defenders held on to hope, clinging to the belief that salvation might yet come from some unexpected quarter. In the end, it was a combination of heavy artillery and sheer bad luck that sealed the city's fate. A fateful breach in the walls, created by the relentless pounding of the Ottoman cannons, proved to be the tipping point. As the defenders scrambled to mend the breach, Mehmed's forces surged forward, seizing the opportunity with ruthless efficiency. It was the beginning of the end for Constantinople, a moment that would echo through history as the final chapter of an empire that had once ruled the known world. So, while the city of Constantinople may have been living out its own version of a medieval soap opera, complete with drama, passion, and tragedy, the ending was anything but a fairy tale. The fall of the city was a harsh reminder of the impermanence of power, a testament to the relentless march of history. Yet, even in the face of defeat, there was something undeniably noble about the defenders' last stand, a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of insurmountable odds. As the dust settled and the echoes of cannon fire faded, the world was left to grapple with the legacy of a city that had once stood at the crossroads of history. As the sun rose on May 29, 1453, Constantinople was poised on the brink of its final act, like the last scene of a Shakespearean tragedy where everyone's on edge, knowing that the curtain's about to fall. Mehmed Roman II, the young sultan with ambition sharper than a freshly honed scimitar, was ready to unleash his ultimate assault. The Ottomans had been pounding the city for weeks, and now it was time for the grand finale. Picture an orchestra reaching its crescendo, except instead of violins, we're talking about thousands of soldiers, cannons, and a whole lot of shouting. The final assault was a well-rehearsed dance of destruction, and Mehmed had choreographed it with precision. As the dawn light crept over the horizon, he ordered his troops forward in a massive wave. The Ottoman army, now swollen to nearly 100,000 strong, charged toward the battered Theodosian walls like a tsunami of humanity. Their battle cries filled the air, a thunderous cacophony that made the ground tremble. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine Roman XI knew this was it, the moment that would define his legacy. According to legend, he stripped off his imperial regalia, donned the armor of a common soldier, and joined the fray. While it sounds like the kind of romantic tale you'd find in a hero's ballad, the truth was both simpler and sadder. Constantine was a leader who refused to abandon his people, even when everything was falling apart around him. His decision to fight alongside his men was a testament to his resolve, even if it was ultimately futile. As the Ottomans breached the walls, chaos erupted in the streets of Constantinople. The city's defenders, outnumbered and exhausted, fought bravely but were quickly overwhelmed. It was like watching a dam burst. Once the Ottomans got through, there was little to stop them. The battle turned into a brutal melee, with fighting breaking out in the winding alleys and grand plazas that had once been the pride of the Byzantine Empire. Constantine's last stand was the stuff of legends, but not the kind with happy endings. The emperor allegedly died sword in hand, a final act of defiance against the inevitable. Whether he went down swinging or was cut down in the chaos, his death marked the definitive end of Byzantine resistance. The last emperor of Rome, a title that carried the weight of centuries, had fallen, and with him the last vestiges of an empire that had once ruled over vast swaths of the known world. With the city's defenses broken, the Ottomans poured into Constantinople like a flood. It was a scene of utter pandemonium, where survival became a desperate game of hide and seek. Residents scrambled to find refuge wherever they could, ducking into churches, cellars, and any place that might offer a shred of safety. But there was little to be found. The sacking of Constantinople wasn't a genteel affair. It was a free-for-all of pillage and plunder, where the only rule seemed to be, take what you can. Mehmed's troops, driven by the promise of loot, ransacked the city with abandon. Churches were stripped of their treasures, homes were looted, and the streets ran with the cries of the conquered. The Hagia Sophia, that magnificent jewel of Byzantine architecture, was transformed from a place of worship into a makeshift stable. It was as if history was being rewritten in real time, with the Ottomans penning a new chapter in the story of Constantinople. And let's talk about the economic impact, because, oh boy, was it significant. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just the end of a city. It was a seismic shift in the economic landscape of the region. The Byzantines had been the gatekeepers of trade between Europe and Asia, but now the Ottomans held the keys. The city's capture marked the dawn of a new era, one where the Ottomans would dominate the trade routes, shifting the balance of power and wealth in the region. As the dust settled, maimed Roman II entered the city, not as a conqueror drunk on victory, but as a ruler with a vision. He saw Constantinople not just as a prize, but as the future capital of his empire. The Sultan wasted no time in reshaping the city, initiating a massive rebuilding effort that would transform the ancient metropolis into Istanbul, the heart of the Ottoman world. It was a city reborn, but one that would forever carry the scars of its tumultuous past. In the aftermath, the power dynamics of the region underwent a dramatic reshuffling. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves across Europe, serving as a wake-up call to the powers that had once taken the Byzantine Empire for granted. With the Ottomans now sitting at the crossroads of East and West, the geopolitical landscape was irrevocably altered. It was a new world order, where the Ottomans would play a leading role on the global stage. As for the city's residents, they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Some were taken as slaves, others fled to distant lands, and a few remained, adapting to life under new rulers. It was a harsh reality, a testament to the brutal cost of war and conquest. Yet, even in the face of such upheaval, life in Constantinople carried on, as it always had. The city might have fallen, but its spirit endured, a resilient force in a world forever changed by the march of history. So, while the romanticized tales of Constantinople's fall might paint it as a noble last stand, the reality was a bit more complicated. It was a story of ambition and power, of resilience and loss. It was a reminder that even the mightiest empires can crumble, and that the only constant in history is change. As the Ottomans celebrated their victory, the world watched, knowing that a new chapter was beginning, one that would shape the course of history for centuries to come. As the world watched the Ottomans celebrate their triumph, dust was still settling over a landscape forever altered, both literally and metaphorically. Constantinople, the city that had been the beating heart of the Byzantine Empire, was now a jewel in the Ottoman crown, and the world had to grapple with the implications of this seismic shift. You see, the capture of Constantinople wasn't just a blip on the radar of history. It was like flipping the chessboard in the middle of a high-stakes game. The fall marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, and with it, 1,000 years of Roman legacy came crashing down like a poorly stacked Jenga tower. Now, let's zoom in on the economic ramifications, because money talks, even when the conversation is in a dead language. The Ottomans, now in control of the city, suddenly found themselves the new landlords of the ultimate piece of real estate. Constantinople, or Istanbul as it would soon be known, was the gateway between Europe and Asia, a position that was basically the historical equivalent of owning the world's busiest toll booth. The city became the nerve center of trade routes, drawing merchants and travelers from every corner of the known world like moths to a very lucrative flame. With the Ottomans at the helm, they could now dictate the terms of trade, and boy, did they relish that power. The spice must flow, after all, and it now flowed through Istanbul's bustling bazaars, filling the Ottoman coffers with riches that would make even the most successful tech mogul raise an envious eyebrow. Culturally, the shift was just as significant. Maimed Roman II wasn't content with simply capturing the city. He wanted to transform it, to mold it into the vibrant capital of his empire. And transform it he did. The Ottomans were as much about culture as they were about conquest, bringing with them a rich tapestry of art, architecture, learning that would seep into the very stones of Istanbul. The Hagia Sophia, once the crowning glory of Byzantine religious architecture, was repurposed as a mosque, a move that was as symbolic as it was practical. Under Mehmed's rule, the city became a melting pot of cultures and ideas, a bustling metropolis where East met West in a clashing symphony of sights, sounds, and smells. It was a renaissance of sorts, a blooming of art and science that would eventually ripple outwards, influencing the world beyond the city's ancient walls. But let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. The harsh reality was that the fall of Constantinople was a brutal affair, a stark reminder that history is often written in blood and sweat. The romanticized tales of gallant last stands and noble sacrifices are all well and good, but the truth is that the city's capture was a messy, chaotic, and often tragic affair. The transition from Byzantine to Ottoman rule was not without its casualties, both human and cultural. The city's population, once a thriving mix of ethnicities and religions, was decimated by the siege, and many of those who survived faced a grim future under new masters. It wasn't all grand visions and cultural exchanges. Sometimes, it was just about getting through the day in a city turned upside down. Yet, amid the ruins and the smoke, there was a resilience that couldn't be snuffed out. The people of Constantinople, those who managed to stay or return, adapted to their new reality with a tenacity that would make a cockroach envious. They rebuilt their lives, their homes, and their communities, stitching together a patchwork of past and present, Byzantine and Ottoman. And while the city may have changed names, its spirit, the indomitable will to survive and thrive, remained a constant. In the grand scheme of things, the fall of Constantinople was a turning point, a pivot in the story of empires and civilizations. It was a reminder that power is as fleeting as the winds that once carried the sails of Byzantine ships across the Bosporus. The Ottomans took the stage as the new leading actors in the drama of history, but the story was far from over. Istanbul would rise as a center of culture and commerce, a city that would wield influence across continents and centuries. It was a new chapter in an old book, one that would continue to be written by the countless lives that passed through its gates. As we close this tale, let's remember that history is not just a litany of battles and borders, but a tapestry woven from the threads of human experience. The fall of Constantinople is more than a story of conquest. It's a testament to the resilience of those who lived through it and the enduring legacy they left behind. So, here's to Constantinople, to Istanbul, to the city that fell but never truly surrendered. Its spirit, like history itself, marches on, an eternal reminder of the power of people to adapt, endure, and ultimately rise again. If someone dropped you into the Bronze Age and told you to find the ancient equivalent of an Amazon distribution center, your best bet would be the bustling cities of the Harappan civilization. Nestled in the Indus Valley, these folks weren't just minding their own business. They were busy fine-tuning the art of international trade like a bunch of prehistoric Jeff Bezoses. So, how did they pull this off? Well, it starts with geography, because location is everything, even when the most advanced mode of transport is a cart pulled by oxen. The Indus Valley, stretching across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, was a prime piece of real estate. With fertile land nourished by the Indus River and its tributaries, the Harappans had the agricultural prowess to feed a thriving population. This isn't just some small village we're talking about. At its peak around 2500 BCE, the civilization boasted over 1,000 settlements. Count M. We're talking about places like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, each supporting tens of thousands of residents. These were bustling urban centers, not quaint hamlets. Now, let's talk trade. The Harappans were the kind of people who didn't just sit around waiting for goods to come to them. Oh no, they were proactive networkers, engaging in long-distance trade with Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf region. This wasn't just some casual, hey, let's swap a few beads kind of deal. We're talking structured, strategic trade networks that stretched over 1,500 kilometers. Imagine a journey from Karachi to Kuwait without the luxury of air conditioning or a GPS. The Harappans shipped out a treasure trove of goods, colorful carnelian beads, intricately crafted pottery, and textiles that would have made any Bronze Age fashionista swoon. In return, they imported much-needed resources like copper, tin, and even luxury items like lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. These weren't just trade items. They were essentials for maintaining their status as a powerhouse of production. But here's the kicker. The Harappans didn't leave us a handy manual explaining their trade operations. They were more about keeping things low-key, with no Rosetta Stone to decode their script. So, historians have pieced together their trade story through archaeological finds. Seal stones, for instance, served as branding tools, marking goods with distinctive symbols that said, "Yes, this is authentic Harappan quality." Let's not forget about their trade partners. Mesopotamia, with its bustling cities like and Uruk, was a hotbed of commerce and culture. The Harappans were all over it, sending goods via the sea routes along the Persian Gulf. This wasn't a quick hop on a flight. It involved navigating treacherous waters and negotiating with local traders. Records even mention a place called Meluha, likely referring to the Indus Valley, indicating how deeply the Harappans were embedded in Mesopotamian economic life. What's particularly tantalizing is the image of Harappan merchants in Mesopotamian bazaars, haggling over the price of goods amidst a cacophony of different languages and cultures. Talk about a multicultural shopping experience. It's like being at the world's oldest trade expo, complete with clay tablets instead of business cards. So, what drove the Harappans to become such trade moguls? Well, necessity is a powerful motivator. The Indus Valley's lack of metal resources meant they needed to import materials critical for tool and weapon making. Additionally, the Harappans had a talent for creating goods that others wanted. They knew how to play the supply and demand game long before anyone had even invented the term. The Harappan trade network was a marvel of ancient logistics, a testament to their ingenuity and adaptability. They laid the groundwork for future civilizations to dream big and trade bigger. So, the next time you marvel at a package arriving at your doorstep with the click of a button, spare a thought for the ancient Harappans, who were making it happen with nothing but grit, determination, and a little help from the Indus River. So, the Harappans were the Bronze Age's logistical ninjas, crafting a trade network that would make modern economists weep with envy. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of how they actually pulled this off without the wonders of next-day delivery. First up, we have to talk about what was on the Harappan menu of trade goodies. These folks were masters of the carnelian bead game. We're talking vibrant reds and oranges that would make a sunset jealous. These beads were the bling of the Bronze Age, adorning the necks and wrists of elite Mesopotamians and even Egyptians. Imagine the ancient equivalent of a designer handbag, but made from semi-precious stones. And how did they move these goods across such vast distances without the luxury of airmail or a reliable postal service? Enter the Indus River, the Harappan equivalent of a 6-lane highway. They crafted sleek, flat-bottomed boats capable of navigating the river's meandering paths. These weren't your average rowboats. They were the Bronze Age's answer to container ships. And when water transport wasn't an option, they hit the road, quite literally, with caravans of ox-drawn carts. Picture a convoy of carts, each packed to the brim with trade goods, clattering along dusty roads. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't glamorous, but it got the job done. Now, let's chat about the Harappan seals, those tiny pieces of carved stone that played a big role in their trade operations. Think of them as ancient barcodes. Each seal had a unique symbol or pictograph that identified the owner or the origin of goods. Seal impressions found on clay tags suggest these were attached to bundles of goods, ensuring a standard of quality and authenticity. They were the ultimate brand guarantees, like a luxury label stamped on a designer product. And just like today, brand recognition was everything. A Harappan seal was like a trust badge in the bazaars of Mesopotamia, signaling goods that were worth every shekel or silver piece. But let's not romanticize this too much. The Harappans faced some serious logistical headaches. Imagine trying to coordinate shipments across thousands of kilometers without the convenience of digital tracking or even a postal service. Each trade mission was a gamble, subject to the whims of weather, bandits, and political tensions. Crossing the Arabian Sea or navigating the Persian Gulf was no small feat either. They had to contend with monsoon winds, treacherous waters, and the occasional pirate. Yet, they managed to create a system where goods flowed relatively smoothly, a testament to their organizational prowess. And speaking of myths, let's bust a big one. The idea that the Harappans lived in some utopian society where trade was all sunshine and carnelian beads. The reality was grittier. They had to deal with trade embargoes, fluctuating demand, and the constant threat of their trade routes being cut off by rival powers. Economic alliances were as fickle then as they are now, subject to the same political machinations and backdoor deals. It wasn't all harmonious exchanges and friendly barter systems, but a complex web of economic incentives and strategic partnerships. The Harappans were also adaptive. They didn't just trade blindly. They carefully crafted their export goods to suit the tastes and demands of their trading partners. If Mesopotamia craved more lapis lazuli, they ramped up imports from Afghanistan. If copper was the hot commodity, they ensured their trade routes could supply it. It was all about keeping the customers happy and the trade wheels turning. This adaptability was a key factor in their success, and a lesson in supply chain management that still resonates today. In short, the Harappans were not just passengers on the trade bandwagon. They were the drivers, steering their civilization towards prosperity and influence. They embraced the chaos and unpredictability of ancient trade, turning it into an advantage. Their legacy is not just in the artifacts they left behind, but in the enduring story of human ingenuity and resilience. And as we delve deeper into their trade networks and economic strategies, we'll uncover even more about how these ancient moguls kept their civilization thriving against all odds. Stay tuned, because the Harappan tale is far from over. It's just getting started. Just as we think we've cracked the code of Harappan trade, let's dive into the social and political structures that made it all tick. Picture this: a civilization without kings or queens, yet somehow thriving. That's right. The Harappans didn't need a throne to run their show. They had a decentralized system that worked like a charm, or at least like a well-oiled chariot wheel, despite the absence of a central figurehead. This lack of monarchical oversight didn't mean chaos. Instead, it was an orchestra of small, interconnected power centers, each playing its part. The myth of a centralized Harappan state is as persistent as a mosquito in summer, but let's swat it away for good. Archaeological evidence suggests that Harappan cities were more like loose confederations. Think of them as a network of city-states, each managing its own affairs, but cooperating when it came to the big stuff, like trade. Instead of a singular ruler barking orders from a palace, power was likely distributed among local elites or councils. These local bigwigs knew that cooperation was the secret sauce to keep the trade wheels turning. The beauty of this setup was in its flexibility. Without a single point of failure, no king to topple, no capital to conquer, the Harappans boasted a resilient system. If one city faced a drought or a trade hiccup, another could pick up the slack. It's like having a backup generator when the power goes out. While centralized states were busy dealing with power struggles and palace intrigue, the Harappans were quietly getting things done. They didn't need to shout about their power. They let their trade success do the talking. Socially, the Harappans were a fascinating bunch. They had a class structure, sure, but it wasn't as rigid as you might expect. There were no extravagant tombs stuffed with gold to indicate a pharaoh-like figure, and no towering statues of rulers glaring down at their subjects. Instead, they left behind evidence of a society where wealth might have been more evenly distributed. Their cities were meticulously planned with uniformity in housing and sanitation. Everyone had access to the same urban luxuries, like an ancient version of free Wi-Fi. Let's not romanticize it too much, though. It wasn't all egalitarian paradise. There were certainly differences in status, but these were likely tied to trade and occupation rather than divine right. Merchants and artisans could wield significant influence, thanks to their indispensable roles in trade. If you were the guy who knew how to carve a mean carnelian bead or had connections with a Mesopotamian middleman, you were probably living the Bronze Age dream. Now, about those Harappan cities. They were marvels of urban planning. Mohenjo-Daro, for instance, had streets laid out in a grid pattern that would make a modern city planner swoon. Each block had standardized brick sizes, and buildings were constructed with baked bricks, which were more durable than their sun-dried counterparts. While some had homes that were slightly more spacious, even the humblest dwellings had access to advanced amenities like drainage systems and wells. That's right. While some contemporary civilizations were dealing with open sewers, the Harappans were flushing away their waste like civilized folks. Politically, it's likely that these cities were governed by some form of assembly or council. These could have been a mix of elders, merchants, and religious leaders, kind of like a board meeting, but with fewer PowerPoints and more clay tablets. Decision-making was probably a communal affair, with a focus on consensus rather than top-down decrees. This decentralized way of governing may have seemed chaotic to outsiders, but it allowed for adaptability and local autonomy, qualities that kept their trade networks robust. Religion, too, played a subtle role in the Harappan tapestry. Without a pantheon of gods to appease or gigantic temples to build, religion was probably more personal and less institutionalized. The famed priest-king statue from Mohenjo-Daro hints at a society where spiritual and temporal leadership might have mingled. Religious symbols on seals and pottery suggest a shared cultural identity, which no doubt helped in uniting these diverse city-states under a common ethos. Let's talk logistics. The absence of a monarch didn't mean a lack of bureaucracy. The Harappans were meticulous record keepers, even if we can't read their script just yet. Those seals we mentioned earlier, they were part of a sophisticated system of trade documentation. Goods were tracked, and taxes likely levied, ensuring that even in a decentralized system, there was order and accountability. So, what's the takeaway here? The Harappans were early adopters of a decentralized business model. They proved that you don't need a king to run a kingdom, just a good organizational chart. Their flexible, networked approach made them resilient in the face of challenges that would have crippled more centralized states. It's a testament to their ingenuity that their civilization thrived for centuries, leaving behind a legacy of trade and urban sophistication that still astounds us today. In essence, the Harappans were the ultimate team players, showing us that a little cooperation goes a long way. As we continue to unravel their story, we'll see how this decentralized system allowed them to adapt and evolve, setting the stage for their eventual interactions with other cultures. So, stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover about the Harappans and their innovative approach to ancient civilization management. As we delve further into the Harappan narrative, it's clear they had a pretty sweet gig going with their decentralized setup. But let's not pretend everything was a stroll through a lush Indus Valley park. Enter the decline of Harappan trade networks, a story with more twists than a Bollywood thriller, and unfortunately, not as much dancing. Now, when it comes to the fall of civilizations, everyone loves a good cataclysmic end. Who doesn't enjoy a dramatic tale of floods or invaders sweeping in while the good folks of Harappa were just minding their bead-making business? But hold on to your carnelian necklaces, because the reality is a bit more mundane and a lot more tragic. Let's start with the unglamorous villain of this tale, environmental change. Around 1900 BCE, the climate started acting like a teenager, unpredictable and moody. The once reliable monsoon rains began to play hard to get, and the mighty Indus River was no longer the faithful friend it used to be. It's like your GPS suddenly deciding it's tired of giving you directions. The river changed course, leaving previously fertile land as dry as a history professor's lecture on a Friday afternoon. Tectonic activity also decided to join the party, adding a few unwelcome shakes and rattles to the mix. The shifting tectonic plates didn't just rearrange the furniture, they played havoc with the land itself, possibly causing earthquakes that would make even the most stoic Harappans spill their lentil stew. When you're trying to run a trade empire, the last thing you need is your infrastructure doing the cha-cha. But let's not lay all the blame on Mother Nature. Human factors played their part too. As resources became scarcer, the Harappans faced the economic equivalent of a midlife crisis. Trade networks that once stretched like ancient silk roads began to fray and unravel. Those long-distance trade routes to Mesopotamia and beyond, they started to look more like relics of a bygone era. The Harappans were like a rock band whose hits were no longer topping the charts, while newer civilizations like the emerging cultures in the Ganges basin were the fresh, hot new acts getting all the gigs. And here's where we debunk the myth of a sudden, dramatic collapse. The Harappan decline was more of a gradual fading away, like a favorite song slowly turning down in the background. It was a series of unfortunate events rather than a single, blockbuster catastrophe. Economic downturns, coupled with environmental pressures, slowly squeezed the vitality out of their civilization. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa didn't get sacked or burned to the ground. They just slowly emptied as people drifted away in search of greener and wetter pastures. So, what about the romanticized notion of the Harappans packing up their ox carts and heading for the hills to start anew? It's a nice thought, but the reality is that many simply integrated into other cultures, leaving behind their magnificent cities as ghostly whispers of a once thriving metropolis. It's a bit like moving to a new town because the internet speed is better, but leaving your perfectly good house behind. As the Harappan influence waned, the power dynamics in the region shifted. The Harappans didn't vanish. They morphed, adapted, and perhaps even thrived in new ways within other emerging societies. It's a testament to their adaptability and resilience, even as their grand urban centers became silent. The decline of the Harappan trade networks is a poignant reminder of how civilizations, no matter how advanced, are vulnerable to the caprices of nature and the unpredictable whims of human society. They didn't go out with a bang, but with a quiet, dignified retreat, leaving us with more questions than answers and a sense of wonder at their enduring legacy. In the next chapter of this saga, we'll explore how the remnants of Harappan society seeded future cultures, influencing the subcontinent in ways that still echo today. Their story is one of transformation and resilience, proving that while civilizations may falter, they also lay the groundwork for what comes next. So, stay tuned as we unravel the threads of what happens when the dust settles and the world keeps spinning. As the dust settled on the Harappan civilization, it left behind more than just abandoned cities and enigmatic seals. Their legacy, a tapestry woven with threads of innovation and adaptability, continued to influence the civilizations that followed. The Harappans didn't just disappear. They transformed the landscape of ancient trade and left a blueprint for economic networks that still resonate today. Consider them the unsung architects of globalization. Long before anyone had dreamt up stock markets or multinational corporations, let's dive into how these ancient trailblazers left their mark. The Harappans were the original urban planners, and their influence can be seen in the grid-based layouts of later Indian cities. Mohenjo-Daro's meticulous street planning didn't just vanish. It inspired subsequent urban development. Fast forward to the Mauryan Empire, centuries later, when cities like Padalipatra were laid out with similar precision. It's as if the Harappans left behind urban design cheat sheets, whispering through the ages, "Hey, straight lines and right angles are where it's at." Now, onto the economy. Harappan trade networks were like the ancient world's LinkedIn, connecting cultures and facilitating the exchange of not just goods, but ideas. Their knack for crafting desirable goods found echoes in the industries of later Indian civilizations. Lustrous carnelian beads and intricate seals became the prototypes for luxury items that future traders would covet. It's as if the Harappans wrote the first draft of the ancient Silk Road, setting the stage for a global exchange that would eventually stretch from China to Rome. The Harappans' economic ingenuity also left a lasting impact on agricultural practices. Their sophisticated irrigation systems, crucial for sustaining large urban populations, were adopted and adapted by later civilizations. The concept of harnessing natural resources to maximize agricultural output became a cornerstone of economic planning in the subcontinent, ensuring food security and fostering population growth. It turns out ancient water management wasn't just about keeping your feet dry. It was about laying the foundations for future prosperity. But let's not forget the social and political lessons the Harappans unwittingly imparted. Their decentralized governance model, while not without its challenges, offered a unique approach to leadership that influenced later systems. The notion of local autonomy and collective decision-making found echoes in the village republics of ancient India, where councils of elders governed with a focus on consensus. The Harappans silently taught us that power doesn't always need to be centralized. Sometimes, it's better when it's as distributed as their trade goods. Speaking of trade, the Harappans were pioneers in branding and quality control, concepts that are the backbone of modern commerce. Their seals, with their distinct symbols, were the ancient equivalent of a trademark. They ensured that Harappan goods were synonymous with quality. This forward-thinking approach to trade left a legacy of trust and reliability, values that are vital to any successful economic system. In a way, every time you check reviews before a purchase or look for a brand logo, you're channeling a bit of Harappan spirit. Now, let's zoom out and consider the broader implications. The Harappans were early adopters of globalization, fostering cross-cultural exchanges that predated modern economies by millennia. Their trade networks were not just about goods, but about connecting people and ideas, a reminder that economic systems are, at their core, about human interaction. They understood the importance of supply and demand, adapting their products to meet the tastes of distant markets. Sound familiar? It's the same principle that drives today's global market, albeit with fewer ox carts and more shipping containers. The Harappans also taught us about resilience, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances, whether environmental shifts or economic pressures, is a lesson that still holds value today. In a world where economies can rise and fall with the stock market's whims or natural disasters, the Harappan story is a testament to the power of flexibility and innovation. They remind us that while the world may change, the fundamental principles of trade and human connection remain constant. And let's not forget the cautionary tale their decline offers. The Harappans show us that even the mightiest trade networks can falter if they fail to adapt to new challenges. Their gradual fade serves as a reminder of the vulnerabilities inherent in any economic system. It's a lesson in humility for modern societies, a prompt to continuously innovate and remain vigilant against complacency. In the end, the Harappan story is a rich tapestry of human ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. Their legacy, etched in the ruins of their cities and the echoes of their trade networks, continues to inspire and instruct. They were the silent architects of systems that would shape civilizations for millennia to come. So, the next time you click Buy Now or navigate a grid-patterned city, take a moment to appreciate the Harappans. They were the original global citizens, crafting a world that was more connected than we often give it credit for. And their story is a testament to the timeless dance between humanity and commerce. In the sultry embrace of the Hawaiian Islands, where the ocean whispers secrets to the shore, a royal infant named Liliʻuokalani was born on September 2, 1838. She would later be known to the world as Queen Liliʻuokalani, Hawaii's last reigning monarch. This tiny island kingdom, teetering on the cusp of monumental change, was already a melting pot of cultures and ideas, much like the young princess herself. Lydia entered the world in an era when Western missionaries and traders had started to leave their mark on the Hawaiian landscape, reshaping it with an enthusiasm that bordered on zealotry. The missionaries brought with them not just the Bible, but also the English language, Western education, and a rather rigid sense of propriety. For Lydia, this meant growing up at the intersection of two worlds: the traditional Hawaiian way of life, with its chants and oral histories, the new Western customs that were making themselves at home on the islands faster than you could say annexation. Her education was a veritable buffet of contrasts. On one hand, Lydia was steeped in the rich traditions of Hawaiian culture, learning the chants and legends that had been passed down through generations. On the other, she was also tutored in English by American missionaries, who were probably less interested in Hawaiian lore and more focused on converting her to their faith. She was smart as a whip, and her knack for diplomacy was apparent even as a child. One could say she learned to navigate the cultural tightrope with the grace of a trained acrobat. But it wasn't all books and missionary sermons. Lydia had a penchant for music that would eventually define her legacy as much as her political life. Despite what some might think, she wasn't just a monarch with a crown and a scepter. She was a composer of over 150 songs, including the hauntingly beautiful Aloha O. If you're thinking of Aloha O as just a song about waving goodbye, think again. It's a poignant farewell, a musical tapestry woven with longing and love, capturing the essence of Hawaii's soul. Not bad for a tune penned by a royal who had a nation to run. Lydia's musical genius was complemented by a political savvy that was honed from a young age. The Hawaiian kingdom was no stranger to the pressures of foreign influence. The British, the French, and the Americans were all vying for a slice of paradise, each with their own agendas, and let's face it, a colonial appetite that could rival a luau's feast spread. Lydia learned the art of negotiation and diplomacy amidst these foreign pressures, skills that would later prove both a blessing and a curse. Growing up, Lydia was acutely aware of the cultural collisions that were shaping her world. The Westerners brought with them not just new customs, but also diseases that decimated the native population. Smallpox, measles, and influenza swept through the islands like a biblical plague. The native Hawaiian population plummeted from an estimated 300,000 in the late 1700 to just 80 000 by the time Lydia was born. It's a grim reminder of the harsh realities that lay beneath the romanticized images of hula dances and palm trees. Despite these challenges, Lydia's upbringing was steeped in privilege and a sense of duty to her people. She was adopted according to the Hawaiian tradition known as Hanai by Abner Paki and Konia, a well-connected couple who ensured she received the best education available. This practice of Hanai wasn't just about adding another mouth to feed. It was a strategic move to strengthen familial alliances and secure the future of the kingdom. Her early exposure to Western influence was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it armed her with the tools she would need to engage with the powerful nations circling her island home like hungry sharks. On the other, it sowed the seeds of cultural erosion that would eventually challenge the very fabric of Hawaiian identity. Lydia was a bridge between the old and the new, a role she would carry with her as she ascended to the throne. As the 19th century marched on, Hawaii stood on the brink of transformation. The sugar industry was booming, and with it came an influx of Western businessmen who were less interested in the island's natural beauty and more focused on turning a profit. These sugar barons wielded considerable power, and their influence would play a pivotal role in shaping the political landscape that Lydia would one day inherit. So here we have Lydia Kamakaua, a young woman of royal blood, a musical prodigy, and a political strategist in the making. She was a product of her time, shaped by the swirling currents of change that defined 19th century Hawaii. Her life was a testament to the resilience and adaptability of a kingdom facing the relentless tide of Western expansion. And while she would eventually rise to become Hawaii's last monarch, her journey was just beginning. And so, as the 19th century Hawaiian sun rose over the Pacific, Lydia Kamakaua was poised to become Queen Liliʻuokalani in 1891. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't the fairy tale coronation with flower leis and hula dancers some might imagine. The stage was more complicated than a love triangle in a soap opera. Liliʻuokalani ascended the throne at a time when her kingdom was already entangled in a web of sugar, politics, and foreign interests. Liliʻuokalani's first royal headache, a little something called the Bayonet Constitution of 1887. Picture this, a constitution forced upon her predecessor, King Kalakaua, by a group of armed, mostly American businessmen and sugar planters. They were as subtle as a bull in a china shop, stripping the monarchy of much of its power and giving voting rights primarily to wealthy landowners, many of whom were not Hawaiian citizens. This wasn't democracy. It was oligarchy with a side of colonial ambition. Determined to restore the power and dignity of her monarchy, Liliʻuokalani sought to draft a new constitution. Her aim was to return voting rights to native Hawaiians and reinstate the monarchy's authority. But it was like trying to take candy from a particularly aggressive baby. Those same sugar barons and their allies were having none of it. After all, they had a sweet deal, pun intended, and they weren't about to let Liliʻuokalani spoil their party. The Queen's efforts drew immediate political backlash. In the halls of power, whispers turned into roars, and the American sugar interests were sharpening their knives. They painted her as a tyrant looking to upend the stability they had so graciously imposed. Stability, of course, being code for we like things just the way they are. Thank you very much. Behind the scenes, economic pressures were boiling over like a pot of poi left unattended. The McKinley Tariff of 1890 had just pulled the rug out from under Hawaiian sugar planters by eliminating the duty-free status of Hawaiian sugar in the United States. Suddenly, Hawaiian sugar was no longer the belle of the ball, and profits were plummeting faster than a coconut from a palm tree. American planters in Hawaii, anxious to restore their competitive edge, saw annexation by the U.S. as their golden ticket, enter stage left. The U.S. military, which had been eyeing Hawaii as a strategic gem in the Pacific. Pearl Harbor was the prize, and the American naval strategists were like kids in a candy store. The geopolitical game was on, and the U.S. wasn't about to let a little thing like native sovereignty get in the way. In January 1893, the simmering tensions reached a boiling point. A group of businessmen and sugar planters, with the not-so-subtle backing of U.S. Minister John L. Stevens, staged a coup. They declared a provisional government and called in the U.S. military for support. Liliʻuokalani, ever the diplomat, chose to step aside temporarily in hopes that the U.S. government, upon learning of the illegal actions, would restore her to the throne. Spoiler alert, the U.S. government had other plans. President Grover Cleveland did call the overthrow an act of war and requested the monarchy's restoration, but his successor, President William McKinley, had a different agenda. By 1898, Hawaii was annexed, and by 1959, it would become the 50th U.S. state. The overthrow of Queen Liliʻuokalani was a classic case of economic and military interests overriding native sovereignty. It was a harsh lesson in realpolitik, where ideals of justice and fairness were easily eclipsed by the cold calculus of power and profit. As for Liliʻuokalani, she would spend her remaining years fighting for her people and her throne, her legacy immortalized in her music and her unwavering dedication to her homeland. The Queen's story is a poignant reminder that history is often written by the victors, but the truth, like her haunting melodies, resonates far beyond the pages of textbooks. With the annexation of Hawaii, you might think Queen Liliʻuokalani would have thrown in the towel, crumbled under the weight of American imperial ambition. But our queen was made of sterner stuff. She appealed directly to President Grover Cleveland, a man who, despite his era's penchant for expansionism, actually had some qualms about the whole regime change business. Cleveland, in an unprecedented move for an American president, declared the overthrow an act of war, and even called for Liliʻuokalani's restoration. But alas, his suggestion was like a snowball in a lava flow, melting away in the political heat of Washington. Enter the Hawaiian counter-revolution. In 1895, a group of royalists, fed up with seeing their kingdom turned into a geopolitical chessboard, attempted to restore the monarchy. It was a bold maneuver, but let's be real. They were up against a provisional government that was as entrenched as a sandcastle at high tide. The uprising was swiftly quashed, and in the aftermath, Liliʻuokalani was arrested. The provisional government, in a display of legal gymnastics worthy of the Olympics, charged her with treason. Now, here's where things start to sound like a scene from a satirical play. Liliʻuokalani was confined to a room in her own palace, Iolani Palace, which, by the way, is the only royal palace on U.S. soil. Talk about irony. Her so-called prison was a far cry from Alcatraz. It was more of a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless, complete with guards and restrictions. She was allowed a few visitors, though they were heavily monitored, and her activities were limited. During her imprisonment, Liliʻuokalani was forced to sign a document abdicating her throne in exchange for the release of her supporters who had been involved in the uprising. The scene. Picture the Queen, a woman of considerable dignity and poise, cornered into a deal as lopsided as a seesaw with a sumo wrestler. She signed, but not without altering the document to state she did so under duress, a footnote in history that underscores her resilience and cunning. Imprisonment at Iolani Palace wasn't all about political drama and legal wranglings. Liliʻuokalani found solace in her music, composing several pieces during her house arrest. Her music was both an escape and a form of silent protest, a tapestry of notes that spoke louder than words ever could. She poured her grief and hope into those compositions, each note a testament to her enduring spirit. Liliʻuokalani's life wasn't just a tragic opera of overthrows and imprisonments. It was also about the absurdities that often accompany the human condition. Despite being held captive, she was allowed to tend to her garden. Imagine her planting seeds with a guard standing nearby, as if she might suddenly sprout a rebellion amongst the roses. And let's not forget the peculiar image of a monarch biding her time by knitting, a pastime she took up during her confinement. One can only wonder if she ever considered knitting a keep-out sign for the American businessmen who had taken over her kingdom. Her imprisonment lasted for 8 months, but the fight for Hawaii's sovereignty continued long after her release. Liliʻuokalani traveled to Washington, D.C. in 1897 to protest the annexation and to plead her case before Congress. She was a sight to behold, a queen dressed in black, symbolizing both mourning and resistance. Though her personal appeal failed to sway the political tides, her presence was a powerful reminder that the story of Hawaii was far from over. Liliʻuokalani's life was a lesson in the tenacity of the human spirit. She was a queen who navigated the treacherous waters of politics and imperialism with a grace that belied her circumstances. Her story is a reminder that history is not just about the victors, but also about those who stood their ground, even when the odds were stacked against them. As we leave Liliʻuokalani in this moment of resilience and resolve, remember that her legacy is not just a tale of loss, but also one of enduring hope. Her music, her fight for justice, and her unyielding love for her people continue to resonate, a haunting melody that echoes through the corridors of time. And though her throne may have been taken, her spirit remains, a queen forever in the heart of Hawaii. The saga, much like her music, continues to unfold, with more notes yet to be played. So, with Liliʻuokalani's spirit still echoing through the halls of history, let's trace her journey from queen to cultural custodian. After the stars and stripes were firmly planted on Hawaiian soil, you'd think Liliʻuokalani might have settled into a quiet life of reflection and knitting. But no, she was just getting started. Her post-monarchy life was less about licking wounds and more about fighting back with the tenacity of a mongoose facing a cobra. Once released from her gilded cage at Iolani Palace, Liliʻuokalani stepped into the role of cultural ambassador and guardian of Hawaiian heritage. It was as if she swapped her crown for a cultural crusader's cape. She recognized that preserving Hawaiian culture was not just a duty, but an act of defiance. The Queen took to her pen and paper, setting her sights on Washington, D.C., like a royal hawk with a mission. In 1897, with a heart full of hope and a suitcase full of resolve, Liliʻuokalani packed her bags and headed to the U.S. Capitol, her goal, to plead against the annexation of Hawaii. Picture her, a regal figure in mourning black, striding into the heart of American politics. She was there to remind Congress that Hawaii was more than just a strategic naval base. It was a sovereign kingdom with its own culture, history, and people. Liliʻuokalani was a living testament to that legacy, a walking reminder that Hawaii was not merely a star to be added to the American flag. Her journey to D.C. was not just a physical voyage, but a symbol of resistance. It was a royal road trip with a purpose, driven by a desire to reclaim her people's land and dignity. She even penned a petition against annexation, gathering over 21,000 signatures from native Hawaiians. No small feat in an era without social media influencers or viral hashtags. The petition was a stark reminder that the people of Hawaii had their own voice, one that echoed through the halls of Congress. But despite her eloquence and persistence, the political winds were not in her favor. The annexation was a done deal, wrapped up in the pretty paper of geopolitical strategy. The U.S. wanted Hawaii, and as history shows, what Uncle Sam wants, Uncle Sam usually gets. Still, Liliʻuokalani's efforts were not in vain. She planted seeds of awareness and resistance that would bloom in later generations. Back home, Liliʻuokalani didn't hang up her activist hat. Nope, she was just as busy as ever, diving into legal battles over Hawaiian land claims. The land court of Hawaii was her new battlefield, and the stakes were high. She fought tooth and nail for the Hawaiian crown lands, which had been snatched away during the annexation like candy from a baby. These lands were not just plots of earth. They were the heart and soul of the Hawaiian monarchy, deeply intertwined with cultural and spiritual significance. The legal wrangling was as complex as a Hawaiian quilt, with threads of colonial law, native rights, and land ownership all tangled together. For Liliʻuokalani, it was a personal mission, a way to honor her ancestors and ensure that future generations would have a piece of their homeland to call their own. While she didn't win every battle, her efforts laid the groundwork for future discussions about Hawaiian land rights and sovereignty. Beyond the courtroom, Liliʻuokalani continued to weave a rich tapestry of cultural preservation through her music. Her compositions were like love letters to her homeland, capturing the beauty, pain, and resilience of Hawaii. Her songs, like Aloha became anthems of resistance and identity, resonating with anyone who felt the sting of loss and the hope of redemption. Music was her sword, her shield, and her solace, a way to keep the spirit of Hawaii alive, even when the political landscape seemed bleak. Liliʻuokalani's musical contributions were not just about creating beautiful melodies. They were an act of preservation, a way to pass down Hawaiian stories and emotions in a world that was rapidly changing. Her music was a bridge between the past and the future, a connection that defied the erasure of Hawaiian culture. As she aged, Liliʻuokalani remained a stalwart symbol of resistance, resilience, and adaptability. She embraced her role as a cultural icon, a living testament to the power of heritage and identity. Her life was a lesson in the art of balancing tradition with modernity, a skill she had honed since her childhood days of navigating between Hawaiian chants and missionary hymns. Her story didn't end with a neat conclusion or a triumphant return to the throne. Instead, it continued to unfold, like a Hawaiian lei, each flower a testament to her enduring legacy. Liliʻuokalani's life was a reminder that history is not just about the grand victories, but about the quiet, persistent struggles that shape the soul of a people. In the end, Liliʻuokalani was more than just Hawaii's last monarch. She was a queen in exile, a cultural warrior, and a beacon of hope for those who refused to let their stories be silenced. Her legacy lives on in the music she composed, the legal battles she fought, and the cultural heritage she championed. As Hawaii continues to navigate its place in the world, Liliʻuokalani remains a guiding star, a reminder that the spirit of a people can never truly be conquered. And so, the story of Liliʻuokalani unfolds like the waves on Waikiki Beach, each ripple carrying a piece of her history, her struggle, and her unyielding spirit. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we'll delve deeper into her lasting impact and the legacy she left behind for the islands she so dearly loved. As we wade into the legacy of Queen Liliʻuokalani, let's strip away the leis and hula skirts and dig into the gritty soil of history. Her story is a complex tapestry woven with threads of cultural preservation, political resilience, and let's face it, the occasional bout of heartache. Liliʻuokalani's reign and its aftermath are often romanticized as a tale of noble resistance against the steamroller of imperialism. But be warned, this is no Disney fairy tale of a queen awaiting rescue. It's more of a Shakespearean drama with all its grandeur and tragedy. First, let's tackle the myth of Liliʻuokalani as a passive victim. Sure, her kingdom was snatched by foreign powers with all the decorum of a pirate raid. But passive, not our queen. She was a political strategist who tried to navigate her way out of a labyrinth of sugar barons and foreign diplomats. Her attempt to draft a new constitution was a calculated move to reclaim power for her people. It wasn't about romantic nostalgia. It was a savvy political maneuver in a game where the cards were stacked against her. Then there's the notion that Liliʻuokalani's reign was simply a ceremonial affair. While it's true she never commanded vast armies or presided over colossal empires, her influence was deeply rooted in cultural preservation and political activism. She wielded her pen like a sword, crafting petitions, memoirs, and compositions that echoed far beyond her island's shores. Her music, in particular, was a cultural clarion call, a way to keep the Hawaiian identity alive, even as Western influences threatened to wash it away like footprints in the sand. In terms of impact on Hawaiian identity, Liliʻuokalani was more than just a monarch. She was a cultural custodian. Her efforts to protect Hawaiian traditions, language, and land rights were a testament to her commitment to her people. Consider her famous composition, Aloha O. It's more than a farewell. It's a love letter to Hawaii, an anthem of resilience. When you hear those notes, you're not just listening to a song, you're tuning into the soul of a nation. But let's not gloss over the hard truths. The reality of Liliʻuokalani's reign is steeped in political machinations and economic pressures. Her efforts were constantly thwarted by the economic interests of American businessmen who viewed Hawaii as a cash cow, or perhaps more accurately, a sugar plantation to be exploited. The Bayonet Constitution of 1887 wasn't just a political power play. It was an economic coup designed to secure American control over Hawaiian resources. Liliʻuokalani's attempts to overturn it were seen as threats to profits, and we all know how well that sits in the boardrooms of history. The annexation of Hawaii was less about cultural exchange and more about strategic maneuvering. The islands were a geopolitical jackpot, offering the U.S. a prime military outpost in the Pacific. Pearl Harbor wasn't just a scenic bay. It was a strategic gem that American military planners eyed with the same greed a sugar baron might reserve for a field of ripe cane. The annexation was a cold, calculated move, an act of empire building disguised as destiny. Fast forward to today, and Liliʻuokalani's narrative continues to resonate in conversations about sovereignty and cultural preservation. Her story is a touchstone for Hawaiian activists and cultural advocates fighting for recognition and rights in a landscape still marked by colonial legacies. Hawaii may be the 50th state, but the questions of native sovereignty and cultural identity remain as alive as the volcanic islands themselves. Liliʻuokalani's legacy is a reminder of the enduring struggle for historical justice. Her life underscores the tension between native rights and economic exploitation, a theme as relevant now as it was in the 19th century. In a world grappling with the legacies of colonialism, her story is a cautionary tale about the costs of empire and the resilience of those who resist it. So, what does Liliʻuokalani's legacy mean for us today? For starters, it highlights the importance of cultural preservation in the face of globalization. As languages, traditions, and identities are increasingly at risk of being homogenized, her actions remind us of the value of diversity and the power of cultural heritage. Liliʻuokalani's music, writings, and political efforts are not just historical artifacts. They are living legacies that speak to the importance of preserving our unique tapestries of identity. In the broader conversation about sovereignty, Liliʻuokalani's life is a beacon for those advocating for indigenous rights and self-determination. Her story is a testament to the power of resistance, the importance of standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds, and the necessity of using every available tool, be it a pen, a petition, or a melody, to fight for justice. For modern Hawaii, Liliʻuokalani's legacy is a call to action. It's a reminder that the battle for cultural preservation and self-determination is ongoing. The issues she faced, foreign control, cultural erosion, economic exploitation, are not relics of the past, but challenges that continue to shape the island's future. Her story encourages Hawaiians to embrace their history, celebrate their identity, and continue the fight for sovereignty and cultural preservation. And so, as we close the chapter on Queen Liliʻuokalani, we do so with the understanding that her legacy is still being written. She was more than just a queen. She was a cultural icon, a political strategist, and a beacon of hope. Her life was a symphony of resilience, woven with notes of resistance and chords of cultural pride. As Hawaii continues to navigate its place in the world, Liliʻuokalani remains a guiding light, a reminder that the spirit of a people can never truly be conquered. Her story, like her music, will continue to echo through the ages, a haunting melody of hope and resistance that refuses to be silenced. Gustavus Adolphus, Sweden's warrior king, burst into this world in 1594, perhaps already clutching a miniature sword rather than a silver spoon. Forget the usual princely pursuits like jousting or falconry. Young Gustavus was more interested in military drills and mastering languages. By the age of 10, this future lion of the north could rattle off phrases in German, Dutch, Italian, and French, giving seasoned diplomats a run for their money. Meanwhile, his peers were still figuring out which end of the lance to hold. It's as if Gustavus had his own personal translator app centuries before the smartphone era. But let's zoom in on his childhood for a moment. Gustavus didn't have your typical royal upbringing. His father, King Charles Roman IX, saw to that. Charles had his eyes set on building a powerful, modern army and wasn't about to let his son become a pampered prince with a penchant for poetry. So, Gustavus was handed the keys to the kingdom of strategy and warfare, which he embraced with the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store. He was trained in military tactics and statecraft with the same rigor that his peers were learning to dance the minuet. By the tender age of 15, Gustavus was already leading troops into battle, his voice probably still cracking as he barked orders. Now, let's talk about Gustavus's education. While most young royals were busy dodging tutors or slipping love notes to court maidens, Gustavus was knee-deep in treatises on Roman warfare. He studied under the watchful eye of Johannes Burius, a scholar who might as well have been the 17th century equivalent of a military Google search. If you wanted to learn how to win a battle with one arm tied behind your back, Burius was your guy. Under his mentorship, Gustavus absorbed the art of war like a sponge, which must have made those long Scandinavian winters feel like a tactical boot camp. Now, about those teenage years, Gustavus wasn't exactly your average awkward adolescent. While other teenagers were wrestling with acne, our guy was wrestling with the intricacies of battlefield formations. His first taste of real command came in 1611, when he was barely 17. The Kalmar War against Denmark was raging, and Gustavus saw it as the perfect opportunity to try out his new military chops. The fact that he managed to hold his own and even gain ground against seasoned Danish commanders is nothing short of extraordinary. It's like a high schooler walking onto an NBA court and scoring a triple-double. But let's not get too carried away with the romanticism. War, as glamorous as it might look in paintings, is a grim affair. The reality of Gustavus's early military career was filled with mud, blood, and the harsh Scandinavian climate that could freeze a man's ambitions in seconds. The romantic notion of a young prince leading his men to victory is all well and good until you consider the logistics, the cost of maintaining an army, the constant threat of disease, and the fragile alliances that could crumble faster than a poorly baked Swedish pastry. Here's a fun nugget. Gustavus was known for his physical presence on the battlefield. Standing at a stout 6 feet, he towered over his men, which is no small feat considering the average height back then was closer to 5.5 feet. It said he had the kind of charisma that could rally troops with just a glance. Yet he wasn't all brawn and no brains. Gustavus had a knack for adapting his strategies on the fly, a skill that would serve him well in the chaotic theaters of the 30 Years' War. Now, myth-busting moment. Gustavus wasn't some divine military prodigy who never tasted defeat. Despite his early successes, he had his fair share of strategic blunders and losses. But what set him apart was his ability to learn from these failures, turning them into stepping stones for future victories. His charisma was matched by an unyielding curiosity and a capacity for self-reflection that most teenage boys would trade their heirlooms for. The young king's reputation as the Lion of the North didn't spring from nowhere. It was honed in the crucible of these early campaigns, where he learned not just how to outmaneuver his enemies, but also how to inspire his men to follow him into the very jaws of danger. By the time he officially ascended to the throne in 1611, Gustavus was not just a king, but a seasoned commander ready to reshape Europe's military landscape. In the grand tapestry of history, Gustavus Adolphus stands out not merely for his martial exploits, but for his innovative spirit. His early life was a blend of scholarly rigor and battlefield experience, a cocktail that prepared him to tackle the geopolitical challenges of his time with a unique blend of youthful vigor and strategic depth. His story is more than just a tale of swords and shields. It's an exploration of how early experiences and education can forge a leader who would go on to leave a lion-sized imprint on the world stage. And so, the saga continues. By the time Gustavus Adolphus officially took the throne in 1611, Sweden was more akin to a scrappy underdog than a Scandinavian powerhouse. Picture a country caught between the geopolitical equivalent of Iraq and a hard place, Denmark to the south, Russia to the east, and the Holy Roman Empire looming ominously. It was like being stuck at a medieval family reunion where everyone's armed and holding grudges. Now, the Kalmar War, that little skirmish where Gustavus first cut his teeth, wasn't some backyard brawl. It was a brutal conflict with Denmark over control of the Baltic Sea trade routes. Those routes were the 17th century version of the Silicon Valley, the key to economic dominance and, more importantly, survival. Sweden needed to punch above its weight class, and Gustavus was just the man for the job. His ascension to the throne wasn't merely a ceremonial changing of the guard. It was a call to arms for Sweden to redefine its place in Europe. Gustavus didn't waste time playing house with the crown jewels. Instead, he dove headfirst into military reform with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. His innovative strategies would make your average military historian swoon. First up, the introduction of mobile artillery. Yes, you heard that right. Gustavus turned those cumbersome castle siege cannons into nimble battlefield game-changers. Picture it. Artillery pieces that could move as nimbly as a chess knight, confounding enemies who were used to static, predictable warfare. It was like swapping out a desktop computer for a smartphone. Suddenly, everything was mobile and dynamic. But let's not gloss over the gritty reality of these reforms. Moving artillery pieces wasn't just a matter of sticking wheels on cannons. It was a logistical nightmare that required coordination, manpower, and of course money, a currency as elusive then as it is now. Sweden, with its modest coffers, had to stretch every riksdaler ingeniously finding ways to fund their military ambitions. They made deals, squeezed taxes, and sometimes just crossed their fingers and hoped for the best. Gustavus was essentially trying to build an iPhone with the budget of a flip phone. And the troops? Well, they weren't the highly trained professional armies we might imagine. We're talking about farmers, blacksmiths, and assorted tradesmen thrust into uniforms and expected to execute complex maneuvers. It was a bit like asking your local bowling league to take on an NFL team. Yet, under Gustavus's charismatic leadership, these men became a disciplined force, capable of outmaneuvering larger, more experienced armies. His ability to inspire loyalty and dedication was nothing short of extraordinary. A 17th century version of a motivational speaker, minus the PowerPoint slides. Now, let's tackle the myth of the noble warrior king. The image of Gustavus as a gallant figure, charging into battle in gleaming armor, is undeniably appealing. But the truth, war was grim, dirty, and chaotic, more akin to trench warfare than chivalric duels. Disease ran rampant, supplies were scarce, and the cold could kill as effectively as any enemy blade. The romantic notion of warfare was often a stark contrast to the harsh realities faced by soldiers and commanders alike. However, Gustavus wasn't just a warlord. He was a statesman, acutely aware of the economic and political intricacies of his reign. He knew that Sweden's survival depended on more than military might. It required savvy diplomacy and strategic alliances, often with unlikely bedfellows. This blend of military innovation and political acumen set Gustavus apart, making him a formidable player on the European stage. Remember, all of this was happening against the backdrop of the 30 Years' War, a conflict that turned Europe into a giant chessboard of chaos. Emerging factions, shifting alliances, and the ever-present specter of religious discord made the political landscape as volatile as a powder keg. Gustavus had to navigate this minefield with the precision of a tightrope walker, balancing Sweden's interests with the larger European dynamics. So, where does this leave our warrior king as he settles into his reign? On one hand, he's a revolutionary figure, reshaping military tactics and redefining Sweden's role in Europe. On the other, he's a ruler confronting the brutal truths of 17th century warfare and the precarious position of his kingdom. His reign is a testament to the power of innovation and the relentless drive to overcome adversity. As we delve deeper into Gustavus's story, we'll see how these early experiences laid the groundwork for his future campaigns. The stage is set for a leader who not only understood the art of war, but also the delicate dance of diplomacy, a dance that would ultimately lead him into the heart of Europe and leave an indelible mark on history. But that's a tale for another day, as the chronicles of Gustavus Adolphus are far from over. Stay tuned for more as we explore the remarkable journey of Sweden's warrior king. Now, with our warrior king poised to leap into the smoldering chaos of the 30 Years' War, let's crank up the volume on an era where Europe was practically a tinderbox of religious and political strife. Gustavus Adolphus isn't just strolling onto any battlefield. He's entering the fray like a rock star, crashing a rival festival. It's 1630, and the 30 Years' War is already well into its 10th year of turning the continent into a grim, sprawling chessboard of death and diplomacy. Gustavus had a knack for dramatic entrances. Picture him landing on the shores of northern Germany with an army that wasn't just an assemblage of musketeers and pikemen, but a manifestation of his military genius. The troops were a well-oiled machine, drilled in the art of war with the precision of a Swiss watch. But don't let the polished exterior fool you. This was no invincible legion of super soldiers, but rather a testament to Gustavus's ability to whip a motley crew into shape. The man was basically the Gordon Ramsay of military commanders, turning raw recruits into a Michelin-starred fighting force. Now, let's get into the specifics. The Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631 is where Gustavus really showed Europe that Sweden had arrived and wasn't just a Scandinavian sideshow. Facing off against the seasoned Catholic forces of the Holy Roman Empire, led by the formidable Count Tilly, Gustavus displayed a level of strategic brilliance that would make even the most seasoned generals blush. The secret sauce: his use of flexible linear tactics, mobile artillery, and a disciplined infantry that could pivot faster than a social media influencer on a controversy. Breitenfeld wasn't just a military maneuver, it was Gustavus's public debut on the European stage. His forces, numbering around 23,000, squared off against Tilly's 35,000. The numbers weren't exactly in his favor, but Gustavus had something the imperial forces didn't: innovation and adaptability. His troops were arranged in smaller, more flexible units, capable of independent action, a bit like transforming a lumbering cruise ship into a fleet of nimble speedboats. Meanwhile, Tilly's troops were still stuck in the past, operating with the rigidity of a 16th century military playbook. Gustavus's strategic genius lay in his ability to adapt to the chaos of battle. When the imperial cavalry initially shattered his Saxon allies, things looked grim, but Gustavus didn't panic. Instead, he deftly repositioned his troops and unleashed a counterattack that turned the tide. His artillery, often referred to as the queen of the battlefield, pounded the enemy with the relentless precision of a metronome, while his infantry advanced with a coordinated rhythm that left the imperial forces reeling. By the end of the day, Tilly's army was in disarray, and Gustavus had scored a decisive victory, a feat that sent shockwaves across Europe. But hold up, was Gustavus truly invincible? Not quite. The myth of his untouchability is as misleading as a politician's promise. Even the best-laid battle plans can unravel faster than a cheap sweater. Take the siege of Nuremberg in 1632, for example. Gustavus attempted to encircle Wallenstein, the imperial general, but found himself mired in a protracted and costly siege that stretched the limits of his logistics. Disease, hunger, and the relentless German weather took their toll on his army, reminding everyone that even the most brilliant commanders can find themselves bogged down in the quagmire of warfare. Gustavus's political acumen was as sharp as his military mind. Forming alliances like a master chess player, he built a coalition that included Protestant states and even France, a Catholic nation with its own axe to grind against the Habsburgs. Cardinal Richelieu, the French statesman, saw in Gustavus a useful ally who could distract and weaken the Habsburgs, allowing France to pursue its own interests. This was 17th century realpolitik at its finest, a dance of diplomacy where yesterday's foe could be today's friend, provided it served the greater good. Yet, let's not romanticize the alliance building as some grand, noble endeavor. It was more like a medieval version of Survivor, with Gustavus deftly navigating shifting loyalties and cutthroat politics to keep his coalition intact. Promises were made, broken, and reforged with the fluidity of alliances in a reality TV show. The stakes were high, and Gustavus played the game with the cunning of a seasoned diplomat, aware that Sweden's survival hinged as much on politics as on military prowess. The myth of Gustavus as an invincible military savant also overlooks the gritty economics of war. Maintaining an army was an expensive affair, and Gustavus had to contend with the harsh realities of financing his campaigns. The Swedish economy, not exactly brimming with wealth, required Gustavus to be as resourceful with his budget as he was with his battlefield strategies. War taxes, loans, and the spoils of conquered territories were all part of the complex financial puzzle he had to piece together. It's like trying to fund a blockbuster movie with an indie film budget. Creative accounting was the order of the day. For all his strategic brilliance, Gustavus was not immune to the brutal whims of fate. The Battle of Lutzen in 1632 proved to be both a tactical victory and a personal tragedy. Though his forces emerged victorious, Gustavus himself fell in the chaos of battle, reportedly after charging into the thick of the fighting. The circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery, with rumors of friendly fire and betrayal swirling like a Shakespearean drama. The Lion of the North may have roared one last time, but his legacy was already set in stone. His death marked a turning point, but it also solidified his place in history as a military innovator and a charismatic leader who left an indelible mark on Europe. As we leave Gustavus on the battlefield, a fallen giant whose shadow stretched across the continent, we find ourselves at a crossroads in the narrative. His involvement in the 30 Years' War had reshaped the political landscape, and his strategic innovations would influence military tactics for generations. Yet, the story of Gustavus Adolphus doesn't end with his death. The ripple effects of his actions continue to shape the course of the war and the future of Sweden. Stay tuned as we explore the legacy of the warrior king and the impact of his reign on the European stage. The saga of Gustavus Adolphus is far from over, and the echoes of his life continue to resonate through the annals of history. But let's step back from the battlefield for a moment and dive into the personal life of Gustavus Adolphus, because even warrior kings have to hang up the armor and deal with the joys and jolts of domestic life. Enter Maria Eleonora of Brandenburg, his wife and queen, a woman whose dramatic flair could rival that of a Shakespearean heroine. Their marriage was one part political alliance, one part passionate romance, and two parts melodrama, making it the 17th century equivalent of a tabloid headline grabber. Maria Eleonora was the daughter of the Elector of Brandenburg, a strategic choice for Gustavus looking to strengthen ties with Protestant German states. They married in 1620, a union that was as much about realpolitik as it was about romance. Their courtship was said to be fiery, with letters exchanged that could set a modern romance novel ablaze. But once the honeymoon phase faded, reality kicked in with all the subtlety of a cannon blast. Maria Eleonora was known for her emotional volatility, a trait that Gustavus, with his penchant for charisma and media-savvy situations, initially found intriguing, if not downright enchanting. However, her penchant for drama soon became a double-edged sword. She was intensely devoted to Gustavus, but this devotion manifested in ways that were sometimes more theatrical than supportive. For instance, when Gustavus was away on his numerous campaigns, Maria Eleonora would reportedly plunge into fits of despair, turning the royal household into a live-action soap opera. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Gustavus wasn't exactly a stay-at-home dad. His life was a series of relentless campaigns and diplomatic maneuvers that kept him away from Sweden's shores more often than not. This constant absence took a toll on their marriage and on Maria Eleonora's mental health. The pressures of royal duties, combined with the isolation of court life, led her to bouts of depression, a condition not helped by the rudimentary understanding of mental health at the time. She was left to manage a kingdom while her husband was off playing military chess in the European theater. And speaking of theater, Gustavus's flair for the dramatic wasn't confined to the battlefield. He was a master of the grand gesture, using his charisma to cultivate an image that was both awe-inspiring and carefully curated. In an era before social media, Gustavus understood the power of image. He knew how to work the crowd, whether it was through public appearances that left subjects breathless or battlefield exploits that found their way into the ballads and stories of the time. His media savvy was reflected in the way he presented himself, always the noble warrior, a king who fought alongside his men rather than directing from a distant throne. This wasn't just about vanity. It was a strategic move to inspire loyalty and command respect. The myth of Gustavus as the Lion of the North wasn't just born from his military genius. It was crafted through a series of calculated, charismatic performances that would make any modern politician take notes. But charisma and charisma alone don't pay the bills, and the harsh reality of constant campaigning wore down Gustavus's health. The rigors of military life, the cold, the wounds, the long marches, took a physical toll. By the time of his untimely death at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, Gustavus was only 37, yet he had lived and battled more than most do in a lifetime. His body bore the scars of a life spent in the service of Sweden's ambitions, a testament to the brutal cost of his relentless drive. The toll wasn't just physical. The strain of maintaining a kingdom while constantly on the move left little time for family life. He and Maria Eleonora had one surviving child, Christina, born in 1626. Christina would later become queen in her own right, but her upbringing was marked by the absence of her father and the emotional volatility of her mother. The legacy Gustavus left her was one of military innovation and political complexity, but it was also a heavy crown of expectation. Behind the legend of Gustavus Adolphus, the Lion of the North, lies the story of a man juggling the demands of a warrior's life with the intricate dance of diplomacy and domesticity. His personal life was as tumultuous as his military campaigns, revealing a leader who was as human as he was historic. The myth of the mighty king shrouds the reality of a man stretched between duty and desire, a narrative as compelling as it is cautionary. As we pause at this juncture, remember that the story of Gustavus Adolphus is far from finished. His legacy would ripple through the corridors of power long after his death, shaping the future of Sweden and the broader European landscape. Stay tuned as we delve into the enduring impact of his reign and the world he left behind, a world forever altered by the vision and valor of Sweden's warrior king. The story of Gustavus Adolphus, Sweden's legendary warrior king, is a testament to the fact that history's heroes are often more complex than their larger-than-life reputations suggest. As we delve into the final chapter of Gustavus's life, let's set the stage. It's 1632, and the 30 Years' War is in full swing, a maelstrom of religious fervor and political machinations that makes Game of Thrones look like a neighborhood spat. Gustavus has become a key player in this grand, chaotic theater, his military genius turning heads and shifting alliances. Enter the Battle of Lützen, a clash that would prove both a triumph and a tragedy. On November 16, 1632, Gustavus led his troops into what would become one of the bloodiest confrontations of the war. The battlefield was a foggy quagmire, a murky setting that seemed more fitting for a horror film than a military engagement. Gustavus, ever the hands-on commander, decided to fight not from the safety of the rear lines, but right in the thick of it, leading his men as he always did, from the front. Now, here's where the myth begins to unravel. The romantic image of Gustavus as an invincible warrior king bravely charging into battle glosses over the grim realities of warfare. Despite his towering presence on the battlefield, he was not immune to the chaos and confusion that reigned supreme. During the battle, conditions were so dire that communication broke down, orders were misheard, and visibility was almost non-existent. In the fog of war, both literal and metaphorical, Gustavus was separated from his men, an oversight that would prove fatal. The specifics of his death remain shrouded in mystery and intrigue, with rumors of betrayal and friendly fire swirling around like leaves in an autumn breeze. What we do know is that Gustavus was shot multiple times, falling from his horse and succumbing to his injuries. His death sent shockwaves across Europe, but it also solidified his status as a martyr for the Protestant cause, a symbol of courage and conviction immortalized in both legend and memory. Yet, the real Gustavus was far more than just a battlefield hero. His influence on military tactics was profound and enduring. He pioneered the use of mobile artillery, transforming cumbersome cannons into strategic assets that could change the course of a battle. His emphasis on flexible, smaller units allowed for greater maneuverability and adaptability, a sharp contrast to the rigid formations of his foes. These innovations would echo through the centuries, shaping modern military doctrine and inspiring future generals like Napoleon and Clausewitz. Economically, Gustavus understood the importance of funding his campaigns, stretching Sweden's modest resources to their limits. His ability to finance such ambitious military ventures was nothing short of miraculous, a testament to his political savvy and economic acumen. By leveraging war taxes, loans, and diplomatic maneuvering, he managed to keep the Swedish war machine running, even when the coffers were as dry as a bone in the desert. Politically, Gustavus was a master of realpolitik, forming alliances that were as strategic as they were temporary. His partnership with France, despite its Catholic leanings, demonstrated his pragmatic approach to diplomacy, where ideology took a backseat to survival and success. This knack for coalition building was a key factor in Sweden's rise as a European power, albeit one with a precarious foothold in the ever-shifting sands of 17th century geopolitics. As we wrap up the tale of Gustavus Adolphus, it's crucial to acknowledge both his legacy and his limitations. On one hand, he was a military innovator, a charismatic leader whose vision and valor reshaped the European battlefield. On the other hand, he was a man who, like all of us, was subject to the whims of fate and the harsh realities of his time. His life was a complex tapestry of triumphs and tragedies, a narrative that defies simple categorization. Gustavus's impact on Sweden and Europe at large was undeniable. His efforts laid the groundwork for Sweden's golden age, a period of cultural and economic flourishing that would follow in the decades after his death. Yet, His legacy is also a cautionary tale of the costs of ambition. The relentless pursuit of power and glory is often accompanied by personal sacrifice and loss, a sobering reminder of the human cost of historical greatness. In the end, Gustavus Adolphus was both a lion and a lamb, a king and a soldier, a myth and a man. His story is one of innovation and inspiration, but it's also a reflection on the complexities of leadership and the enduring challenges of balancing ambition with reality. As we close the chapter on Sweden's warrior king, let us remember him not just as a figure of legend, but as a human being whose life was as multifaceted as the era he inhabited. The echoes of his reign continue to resonate, a testament to the timelessness of his legacy and the enduring allure of his story. The Spartan way of life was like an ancient boot camp that never really ended, except it was less about yelling drill sergeants and more about forging warriors out of sheer necessity. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the Spartan military ethos, let's give a nod to the man who allegedly started it all, Lycurgus, the enigmatic lawgiver of Sparta. Now, Lycurgus is one of those figures who straddles the line between history and mythology with the grace of a tightrope walker. Some historians aren't even sure he existed, but let's not let that spoil the fun. Lycurgus is credited with crafting the Great Retra, a set of laws so integral to Spartan society that they were essentially the backbone of everything Spartan. And when I say everything, I mean it. From the cradle to the grave, Spartans were molded by these rules. Think of the Great Retra as the ultimate Spartan life manual, minus the IKEA-style assembly instructions. Now, why did Lycurgus and his Great Retra make such a splash? Well, Sparta wasn't exactly the most hospitable place. Situated on the Peloponnese Peninsula, its rocky landscape wasn't much good for farming, and its location made it a prime target for invasion. So, Lycurgus figured the best defense was a good offense, and thus the Spartan military ethos was born. At the heart of this ethos was the agoge, a training program that makes modern boot camps look like a weekend spa retreat. Starting at the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and thrown into a world of discipline, hardship, and the occasional cheese theft. Yes, cheese theft. Because nothing says warrior training like a good old-fashioned cheese heist. This wasn't about turning them into culinary connoisseurs, but teaching them stealth and resourcefulness, two traits vital on the battlefield. The agoge was designed to strip away any semblance of individuality, hammering the boys into a single, cohesive unit. And if you're imagining a bunch of kids running around in loincloths, you're not too far off. But let's not forget the brutal reality. These young Spartans endured physical and mental challenges that would make even the toughest obstacle courses look like child's play. The boys were encouraged to fight amongst themselves to build strength and resilience, and failure to measure up meant public humiliation or worse. No pressure, right? While we're on the topic of Spartan toughness, it's worth noting how the Spartans viewed pain and suffering. To them, these weren't unfortunate side effects, but valuable teachers. The idea was that if you could withstand the rigors of agoge, you could handle anything the world threw your way. It's kind of like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Except this was more. What doesn't kill you will probably try again tomorrow. But let's step back and look at the bigger picture here. Why was it so important for Sparta to produce these warrior elites? The answer lies in their social structure. Spartans were vastly outnumbered by the Helots, a subjugated population that did all the agricultural labor so that Spartans could focus on being, well, Spartans. This meant that the threat of a Helot uprising was always looming large, which is hardly the kind of neighborly atmosphere you'd want. Hence, the need for a society of warriors ready to quell any potential rebellion. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. The Spartan way of life was harsh, and their focus on military prowess came at the cost of other pursuits, like art, literature, and basic comforts. For every story of Spartan valor, there's an undercurrent of brutal pragmatism. Their legendary toughness was less about glory and more about survival in a world where vulnerability wasn't an option. So, when you hear about the Spartans and their legendary military ethos, remember that it wasn't just about valor and heroism. It was a life dictated by necessity, shaped by the harsh realities of their environment and the constant threat of conflict. And while the image of the disciplined Spartan warrior endures, the truth is much more complex, and let's face it, a whole lot grimmer than the Hollywood version. But hey, whoever said history had to be all sunshine and roses? Speaking of grim realities, let's dive into the heart of Spartan warfare, the Harplite phalanx. Picture a group of warriors, so tightly packed it would make a can of sardines look spacious. The phalanx wasn't just a military formation. It was a living, breathing emblem of Spartan unity and discipline. Unlike modern warfare, where technology often creates distance between soldiers, the phalanx was up close and personal. Emphasis on personal, if you consider the whole stabbing your enemy with a spear part. The Harplite phalanx was all about cohesion. Imagine trying to play a game of tug-of-war where everyone has to pull in the exact same rhythm. That's the kind of synchronization we're talking about here. Each Harplite was armed with a spear about 7 meters long, because when you're going to poke someone, you might as well do it from a comfortable distance, and a massive bronze shield known as an aspis or harplan. Now, this wasn't just any shield. It was the Spartans' pride and joy, weighing in at a hefty 7 to 9 kilograms. It was so iconic that the very word harplite comes from harplan. Roman historian Polybius once noted that the phalanx was nearly unbeatable from the front, largely thanks to these shields. They weren't just for protection, they were a statement. In fact, the shield was so vital that losing it was considered a fate worse than death. Spartans had a saying, with it or on it, meaning you'd either come back victorious with your shield or dead on it. No middle ground, no excuses. Now, if you think the shield was just a defensive tool, think again. It was also a marketing genius. The surface of the shield often bore symbols or letters representing the soldier's city-state, a bit like ancient advertising. And those famous plumes on their helmets, they weren't just for show. They served to make the warrior appear taller and more intimidating, a psychological tactic as much as a fashion statement, because nothing says fear me like a foot-tall feather mohawk. Economically, equipping a Spartan harplite was no small feat. The full kit, including the spear, shield, helmet, breastplate, greaves, and sword, could cost a small fortune, roughly equivalent to a modern luxury car. And unlike today's armies, where the state often foots the bill, harplites had to pay for their own gear. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is, or in this case, where your spear is. The phalanx was Spartan military innovation at its finest, but it wasn't without its flaws. For starters, it was a bit like a shark, great at moving forward but terrible at turning. A phalanx caught by surprise or flanked could quickly become a mess of chaos and clanging metal. Yet, for all its rigidity, the phalanx relied on the innate trust among its warriors. The guy next to you wasn't just some random dude. He was someone you grew up with, trained with, maybe even stole cheese with back in your Agoj days. This camaraderie was as much a weapon as the spears they wielded. But let's not put these guys on too high a pedestal just yet. The Spartans were masters of their craft, but they weren't superhuman. They bled, they panicked, and they died like anyone else. Their strength lay in their unity and the relentless drilling that made teamwork second nature. The phalanx was a force multiplier, turning a group of individuals into a single, formidable unit. As for tactics, Spartan military leaders weren't exactly the let's try something new type. They preferred the tried-and-true methods, like marching straight at the enemy and overwhelming them with sheer force. Subtlety was not their strong suit, but then again, when you have a wall of bronze and spears advancing toward you, subtlety might just be overrated. Yet, for all the emphasis on discipline and uniformity, Spartan warfare was also about adaptability when it counted. When faced with new challenges, they weren't afraid to tweak their methods or even borrow tactics from their enemies. This pragmatism, mixed with their legendary discipline, is what made Spartans so formidable on the battlefield. So, while the image of the Spartan warrior in his gleaming armor, standing shoulder to shoulder with his brothers in arms, is undeniably romantic, it's also misleading in its simplicity. The reality was a complex mix of economic necessity, psychological warfare, and practical adaptation. The phalanx was as much about the bonds of brotherhood as it was about the sharpness of a spear. In the end, the Spartan approach to warfare was a reflection of their society, brutally efficient, unwaveringly disciplined, and singularly focused on survival. It was a system built on the belief that in order to thrive, they must first master the art of war. Stay tuned, because in the next part, we'll unravel how these warriors faced not just external enemies, but also internal struggles that could make or break the phalanx. As we leave behind the battlefield glories of the Spartan phalanx, let's pivot to the gritty reality that fueled this military machine, the economic engine driven by the Helots. These folks were the unsung, and often unwilling, heroes of Spartan society. While the Spartans were busy perfecting their spear-throwing and shield polishing, the Helots were the ones who kept the home fires burning, literally and figuratively. Picture this. The Spartan state was like a top-tier sports team, and the Helots were the indispensable yet invisible ground crew, keeping the whole operation running smoothly. These were the agricultural laborers who worked the land, ensuring that Spartan warriors could focus on their full-time job of being, well, warriors. And how many Helots were there? Estimates suggest they outnumbered the Spartan citizens by as much as 7 to 1. That's right. The Spartans were basically the minority shareholders in their own society, relying on a vast workforce to maintain their way of life. So, who were these Helots? They were essentially serfs, tied to the land, and owned by the state rather than individual Spartans. Originally, they were the inhabitants of Laconia and Messenia, conquered regions that Sparta absorbed into its domain. Unlike the enslaved populations in other ancient societies, Helots were allowed to live in family units and retain some personal freedoms. But let's not break out the world's okayest boss, mug, just yet. Their lives were far from picturesque, often marked by harsh conditions and the ever-present shadow of Spartan oversight. And here's where the plot thickens. The Spartans maintained control through a blend of fear, intimidation, and periodic violence. Enter the Cryptae, a sort of secret police force comprising young Spartan men who were sent into the Helot territories to keep them in check. Their mission, to eliminate any potential leaders or those seen as a threat. Think of it as a Spartan version of whack-a-mole with far grimmer stakes. The Cryptae wasn't just about keeping the Helots under the thumb. It served as a formative experience for the young Spartans, a way to cut their teeth in the art of psychological warfare. Imagine your gap year, abroad involving covert operations and sanctioned violence instead of backpacking and cultural exchanges. It was brutal, but such measures were deemed necessary to maintain the delicate balance of power in Sparta. Economically, the Helots were a boon for the Spartan military state. They provided the means for Spartans to train full-time without worrying about the mundane details of daily life, like planting crops or making bread. The Helots' labor allowed the Spartans to focus on what they did best, preparing for war and ensuring their dominance. In return, Helots were permitted to keep a portion of the harvest, but let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't a fair trade by any stretch. Now, let's bust a myth, the idea that Spartans were egalitarian among themselves. While it's true that Spartan citizens were theoretically equal in practice, there was a distinct pecking order. Wealthier Spartans could afford better armor and weapons, and while the state supplied basic military gear, those who could invest in additional protection often did. So much for the image of a perfectly equal society, right? Meanwhile, the Spartan women, often overlooked in popular lore, played crucial roles in this societal setup. They managed estates in their husbands' absence and supervised the Helots, ensuring that the economic gears kept turning. Spartan women enjoyed more rights and autonomy compared to their counterparts in other Greek city-states, largely because their primary role was to produce strong offspring and maintain the household while the men were off playing soldier. The combination of Helot labor, Spartan discipline, and the occasional Cryptae intervention created a society that was economically viable, if not exactly humane. Yet, for all its harshness, this system was incredibly effective, allowing Sparta to punch well above its weight on the Greek stage. It's a classic case of necessity breeding innovation, albeit with a side of moral ambiguity. However, the reliance on Helots was a double-edged sword. The constant threat of rebellion meant that Spartan society was always on high alert, much like living next to a volcano that could erupt at any moment. This undercurrent of tension shaped Spartan policies and military strategies. After all, when you fear your own population as much as foreign invaders, you can't afford to be caught off guard. So, when we think of Spartan military might, it's crucial to remember the economic and social dynamics that made it possible. It wasn't just about courage and discipline. It was about maintaining a precarious balance of power both at home and abroad. The image of the Spartan warrior, spear in hand, is iconic, but it's underpinned by the labor of Helots and the strategic machinations of a society that knew its survival depended on more than just martial prowess. In the grand tapestry of history, the Spartans are often painted as the ultimate stoic warriors, but their story is much richer and darker than the myths would have us believe. It's a tale of exploitation and fear, of power and control, and of a society that thrived against the odds by weaving together threads of necessity and ingenuity. As we move forward, we'll delve deeper into how these socio-economic realities not only sustained the Spartan war machine, but also contributed to its eventual challenges. Stay tuned, because the story of Sparta is far from over, and trust me, the next chapters are just as gripping. Now, as we march forward into the heart of Spartan strategy, it's time to strip away the rose-colored goggles of nostalgia and face the brass tacks of their most famous battles. Enter Thermopylae, that legendary clash where 300 Spartans, along with a few thousand other Greeks, because let's not forget they had company, stood against the vast Persian army led by King Xerxes in 480 BCE. This is the stuff of legends, Hollywood blockbusters, and the kind of story that makes you want to yell, "This is Sparta," while kicking someone into the nearest pit. But let's pause the slow-motion action sequences and get real about what went down. First, let's set the scene. Thermopylae, the Heart Gates, was a narrow pass that acted as a natural choke point. Leonidas, the Spartan king, chose this spot to make his stand precisely because it negated the overwhelming numbers of the Persian forces. The Spartans and their allies were outnumbered by some estimates of 20 to 1. Sounds like a suicide mission, right? Well, it kind of was. But this wasn't about winning. It was about making a statement. The Spartan strategy here was a masterclass in tactical delay. By holding off the Persians at Thermopylae, they aimed to buy time for the rest of Greece to prepare for the onslaught. Leonidas and his men knew they were likely facing their doom, but the goal was to inflict as much damage as possible and demonstrate the kind of grit that would rally the other Greek city-states to the cause. And boy, did they deliver. Over 3 days of brutal combat, they held their ground, showcasing the discipline and unity that was the hallmark of Spartan warfare. But let's not sugarcoat the outcome. The Spartans and their allies were ultimately betrayed by a local named Ephialtes, who showed the Persians a path around the pass. This little twist of fate led to the encirclement and eventual annihilation of the defenders. Leonidas and his men fought to the last, embodying the Spartan ethos: never give up, never surrender. It was a noble, if tragic, stand that would echo through the ages. Now, the 300 myth is seductive, painting Spartans as demigods of war. But the reality was less glamorous. These were men, not mythic heroes, each with a family, fears, and a very human vulnerability. What made them legendary wasn't invincibility, but their willingness to face insurmountable odds for a greater cause. This was not just a battle. It was a deliberate sacrifice, intended to galvanize Greek resistance, and in a way, it worked. Switching gears to another pivotal clash, the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE. This showdown marked a seismic shift in Greek power dynamics and showcased the limitations of Spartan tactics. Here, the Spartans faced the Thebans, led by the brilliant general Epaminondas. Unlike the Persians, Epaminondas didn't just charge headlong into the Spartan wall. He rewrote the rulebook on phalanx warfare. Epaminondas introduced the oblique order of battle, a clever maneuver that concentrated his forces on one side, catching the Spartans off guard. He packed his left wing with his best troops and launched a focused attack, bulldozing through the Spartan right. The result: Sparta suffered a humiliating defeat, losing around 1,000 men, including their king Cleopatra. This wasn't just a loss, it was the end of an era. The myth of Spartan invincibility was shattered, and the balance of power in Greece shifted dramatically. Leuctra exposed a harsh truth. Spartan military tactics had stagnated. They were like a once-dominant tech company that kept releasing the same product while competitors innovated. The phalanx, for all its glory, was rigid. Adaptability was not its strong suit, and when faced with something new and unexpected, the Spartans floundered. So why were the Spartans both admired and feared? It's a cocktail of prowess, reputation, and the sheer psychological impact of their name. Their training and discipline were unparalleled, their society geared entirely toward war. Yet, their rigidness became their Achilles heel. The very focus that made them formidable also made them vulnerable to evolving tactics and strategies. The economic and social context is crucial here. The Spartan system was like a finely tuned machine, but one that required all its parts to function perfectly. The Helots were the cogs that kept it running, and the constant threat of revolt was a sword hanging over Sparta's head. They couldn't afford to be away from home for too long, always needing to keep an eye on the restless population they oppressed. This constant tension meant that Spartan expeditions were often short and sharp, like a sprinter, not a marathoner. And let's not forget the political landscape. The alliances and rivalries between Greek city-states were as volatile as a reality TV reunion show. Sparta's aggressive military stance made them plenty of enemies, and their inability to adapt to changing conditions eventually isolated them. Their fearsome reputation kept some foes at bay, but once that veneer cracked, the vultures circled. In the end, Spartan tactics might not have evolved much over time, but their legacy did. They became a cautionary tale about the dangers of resting on one's laurels. Their story is a reminder that even the greatest warriors must adapt or face obsolescence in a rapidly changing world. The Spartan image, a blend of heroism, sacrifice, and ultimately hubris, endures because it speaks to something primal in us all. The desire to stand firm against the odds and the inevitable reality that time waits for no one. And so, as we leave the battlefield for now, remember that the legend of Sparta is as much about the myths we tell ourselves as it is about the facts. It's a story of stoic resilience and tragic downfall, of warriors who became icons, and of a society that dared to dream of perfection only to be undone by its own rigidity. But don't hang up your helmet just yet. The tale of Spartan rise and fall still has a few chapters left to unravel. Stay tuned for more insights into the inner workings of this fascinating ancient powerhouse. As we leave the battlefield for now, remember that the legend of Sparta is as much about the myths we tell ourselves as it is about the facts. It's a story of stoic resilience and tragic downfall, of warriors who became icons, and of a society that dared to dream of perfection only to be undone by its own rigidity. But don't hang up your helmet just yet. The tale of Spartan rise and fall still has a few chapters left to unravel. Stay tuned for more insights into the inner workings of this fascinating ancient powerhouse. Now that we've marched through the gritty details of Spartan warfare, let's take a step back to examine the broader picture of their decline. The Spartans, in their ironclad commitment to tradition, were a bit like that one friend who still insists on using a flip phone in 2023. Admirable, sure, but not exactly practical when everyone else is swiping away on smartphones. Their inflexibility, while initially a source of strength, eventually became their Achilles heel. Decline of Spartan military dominance didn't happen overnight. It was more of a slow burn, like a candle flickering out as the wax runs dry. After the crushing defeat at Leuctra in 371 BCE, the Spartan aura of invincibility was shattered. The Thebans, under the command of Epaminondas, proved that even the mightiest warriors were not immune to innovative tactics. And once that mythic invulnerability was punctured, the floodgates opened. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of the once untouchable Spartans. Economically, Sparta's rigid social system was starting to show cracks. The Helots, who were the backbone of Spartan agriculture, were a simmering cauldron of discontent. The constant threat of rebellion meant that Spartan resources were spread thin. It's like trying to juggle flaming torches while standing on a seesaw. Eventually, something's going to give. As other Greek city-states began to embrace trade and economic diversification, Sparta remained stubbornly agrarian, clinging to a way of life that was increasingly out of step with the rest of the Greek world. Politically, Sparta's isolationist policies weren't doing them any favors either. They were the ancient equivalent of the kid who takes their ball and goes home when the game doesn't go their way. This attitude might have worked when they were the undisputed kings of the playground, but as other city-states formed alliances and grew stronger, Sparta's lack of diplomatic finesse left them vulnerable. In 362 BCE, the Battle of Mantinea further underscored their fading power, with even their allies starting to question the wisdom of sticking with a partner who seemed stuck in the past. As the years rolled on, the internal struggles within Sparta only intensified. The once-tight societal cohesion started to fray as wealth inequality among Spartans grew, and the citizen population dwindled due to the strictures of their eugenics program. Imagine being a select club with an ever-shrinking membership. Eventually, the doors are going to close for good. The once mighty Spartan army, which had been the envy of the ancient world, became a shadow of its former self, unable to muster the numbers or the morale needed for sustained military campaigns. But let's not write off the Spartan legacy just yet. Despite their decline, they left an indelible mark on history and culture. The myth of the Spartan warrior, with their unyielding discipline and stoic bravery, has endured through the ages. It's a narrative that's been romanticized in countless books, movies, and even modern military ethos. The image of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, standing firm against overwhelming odds, resonates because it taps into something primal, the desire to stand one's ground in the face of insurmountable challenges. The appeal of the Spartan myth is partly because it embodies ideals that are easy to admire: strength, resilience, and unity. But let's not forget that these ideals were forged in a society that valued conformity over creativity, and where the pursuit of martial excellence came at the expense of individual freedom. It's the classic tale of the double-edged sword, sharp and effective, but potentially dangerous if mishandled. In the grand tapestry of history, Sparta serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of inflexibility and isolation. Their story is a reminder that the world moves on, and those who refuse to adapt are left behind. Yet, there's something undeniably alluring about the Spartan ideal, a romantic notion of a warrior society that stood apart from the rest, even as it crumbled under the weight of its own rigidity. So, what can we take away from the Spartan saga? Perhaps it's the understanding that strength isn't just about physical prowess, but also about the ability to adapt and evolve. In a world that's constantly changing, those who cling too tightly to the past risk being swept away by the tides of history. The Spartans may have failed to adapt. Their legacy endures as both a source of inspiration and a warning of what happens when tradition becomes a straitjacket. As we close the book on the Spartans, let's remember them as they were: flawed, formidable, and ultimately human. Their story is one of ambition and hubris, of triumph and tragedy, and of a society that dared to defy the odds, only to be undone by the very forces it sought to control. The legend of Sparta will continue to captivate our imaginations, a testament to the enduring power of myth and the complex tapestry of history. So next time you hear the rallying cry of "This is Sparta," remember that it's more than just a catchy line. It's a poignant reminder of a world that once was, and the lessons it left behind. Flashback to 69 BC, a year that, despite its age, was anything but boring. Egypt, a land of pyramids and pharaohs, was under the rule of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a group of Greco-Macedonian rulers who were about as Egyptian as a Greek salad. The Ptolemies had been hanging around since Alexander the Great decided the Mediterranean wasn't big enough for his ambitions and started a game of historical monopoly. By Cleopatra's birth, Rome was the big, bad neighbor, and Egypt was just trying to keep its cool. Enter Cleopatra, Romans 7, born into a family tree that looked more like a tangled mess of vines than a regal lineage. The Ptolemaic dynasty was infamous for sibling rivalries that made today's reality TV look like a love fest. Cleopatra's dad, Ptolemy Roman 12, nicknamed Auletes, which means flute player, though he was probably more adept at playing politics, was clinging to his throne like a cat on a curtain. Rome's influence loomed large, but Cleopatra's family was determined to keep their slice of the Nile pie. In a world where women were often relegated to the background, Cleopatra was already an anomaly. Her education was top-notch, a real Ivy League experience by ancient standards. While most of us are lucky to string together a sentence in high school French, Cleopatra reportedly spoke 9 languages. This linguistic prowess wasn't just for impressing dinner guests. It was her ace in the hole for diplomatic dealings. Cleopatra wasn't just a pretty face. She had the brains to match the beauty, a fact that often gets overshadowed by tales of her romantic escapades. Hellenistic culture was Cleopatra's playground. The Ptolemaic dynasty, despite ruling Egypt, was heavily influenced by Greek traditions. Think of it as cultural fusion, but with more togas and fewer falafel stands. The blending of Greek and Egyptian cultures created a unique atmosphere where Cleopatra thrived. She wasn't just a ruler. She was a cultural connoisseur who could appreciate a good Greek tragedy as much as an Egyptian epic. Now, let's talk about the elephant, or should I say, the asp, in the room, Cleopatra's reputation as a seductress. This myth, perpetuated by Roman historians with a flair for drama, paints Cleopatra as a femme fatale who used her charm to manipulate powerful men. The truth: she was a savvy leader who wielded her intellect like a sword. Sure, she had relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, but these alliances were strategic, not just romantic flings. Cleopatra knew that in a world dominated by men, she had to play the game to survive. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back to Cleopatra's early years. As a young girl, she was groomed for leadership, a process that involved a lot more than just learning to wave gracefully from a chariot. Her education was comprehensive, covering subjects from philosophy to mathematics, ensuring she was well equipped to tackle the challenges of ruling a kingdom on the brink of Roman annexation. Cleopatra's childhood was anything but ordinary. While most kids were playing with sticks, she was learning to navigate the dangerous waters of Egyptian politics. Her family was embroiled in constant power struggles, and alliances were as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Cleopatra had a front-row seat to these dramas, witnessing firsthand the art of negotiation and the perils of betrayal. Her father, Ptolemy XII, faced several coups and exiles, and Cleopatra observed how he managed to claw his way back to power each time. This was a valuable lesson in resilience and the importance of keeping friends close and enemies closer, a mantra she would carry into her own reign. Cleopatra's early exposure to the complexities of ruling a divided kingdom prepared her for the challenges she would face as Egypt's last pharaoh. She learned to balance diplomacy with force, to use her intellect to outmaneuver opponents, and to charm her way out of tight spots when necessary. These traits would become the foundation of her legacy, long after the sands of time had buried the myths and legends surrounding her life. As Cleopatra grew, so did her understanding of the world. She was acutely aware that Egypt's independence was precarious, constantly threatened by Rome's expanding empire. But Cleopatra wasn't one to sit idly by and watch her kingdom fall. She was determined to make her mark, not just as a ruler, but as a formidable force in the ancient world. In the end, Cleopatra's story is one of intelligence, ambition, and resilience, a reminder that the real power lies not in the myths we create, but in the truths we uncover. As Cleopatra's understanding of the world expanded, so did her ambitions, which brings us to a pivotal chapter in her life, Julius Caesar's grand entrance. Now, if you thought your family reunions were awkward, Cleopatra's family dynamics were like a Shakespearean play, minus the iambic pentameter. It was 48 BC, and she was knee-deep in a sibling rivalry with her brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was more interested in the throne than in family harmony. While Cleopatra was trying to play chess, little Ptolemy was flipping the board. Enter Caesar, the Roman general with a penchant for conquering and a political mess on his hands back in Rome. He rocked up in Alexandria, hot on the heels of Pompey, his former ally turned adversary. But instead of finding a neat resolution to his pursuit, Caesar stumbled into a royal quagmire deep enough to drown a legion. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity to seize the day and her throne. Ah, the carpet incident is the ancient world's equivalent of a mic drop. Legend has it that Cleopatra had herself rolled into a rug or possibly a sack, because historical sources can't seem to agree, and smuggled into Caesar's quarters. Was it an audacious PR stunt or a calculated diplomatic maneuver? Let's dissect this. Cleopatra, aware of Caesar's influence and Rome's military clout, needed a way to bypass her brother's lackeys and get a direct audience with Caesar. What better way to make an entrance than to literally roll out the carpet? Now, the romantic in us might picture Cleopatra sashaying out of the rug with a wink and a smile, but the reality was probably more pragmatic. She needed Caesar's support to reclaim her throne, and the stakes were as high as the pyramids of Giza. Egypt was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, and Rome's appetite for grain was as insatiable as Caesar's ambition. By aligning with Caesar, Cleopatra aimed to secure her position and stabilize Egypt's economy, which was teetering like a unicyclist on a tightrope. Economically speaking, Egypt was in a precarious spot. The Nile's flooding could make or break the agricultural output, and the kingdom's coffers were emptier than a politician's promise. Cleopatra knew that to keep the wheels of her kingdom turning, she needed Rome's buying power. Meanwhile, Caesar wasn't just in it for the drama. Rome was hungry, quite literally, and Egypt's grain was the key to feeding the Roman populace and keeping the peace back home. Cleopatra's alliance with Caesar was less about romance and more about survival. Sure, the relationship may have had its steamy moments, but Cleopatra was playing 3D chess in a world where most were content with checkers. By leveraging a partnership with Caesar, she not only secured her throne, but also ensured that Egypt remained a vital player on the Mediterranean stage. Of course, the Romans, with their penchant for gossip, spun Cleopatra's story into one of seduction rather than strategy. The femme fatale narrative was sexier, and let's face it, history loves a good scandal. But Cleopatra was more than just a pretty face wielding charm like a weapon. She was a ruler who understood the complex dance of diplomacy, economics, and power. To add another layer of complexity, Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship wasn't just about political gains. They had a son, Caesarion, whose name suggested grand ambitions, Little Caesar, if you will. Cleopatra saw him as a potential heir to not just Egypt, but perhaps even Rome. Spoiler alert. Rome wasn't exactly thrilled about that idea, but more on that later. So, while the romance between Cleopatra and Caesar often steals the spotlight, it's the economic and political ramifications that carried the real weight. Cleopatra wasn't just securing her kingdom, she was playing a high-stakes game of international diplomacy, navigating a world where alliances could shift as quickly as the desert sands. In the end, Cleopatra's encounter with Caesar was a masterclass in political strategy. It was a partnership born out of necessity, with both parties seeking to fill the gaps in their respective empires. Cleopatra needed stability and resources. Caesar needed Egypt's grain to feed Rome's insatiable hunger. Together, they crafted an alliance that reshaped the political landscape of the ancient world. But let's not pack up our scrolls just yet. This was merely Act 2 in Cleopatra's grand play. Her story continues to unravel like an ancient papyrus, revealing the layers of a ruler who refused to be a mere footnote in history. As Cleopatra and Caesar's alliance solidified, the stage was set for the next act, where political intrigue and personal ambition would once again collide, leaving an indelible mark on history. Stay tuned, because the sands of time have a few more secrets to reveal. As Cleopatra and Caesar's alliance solidified, the stage was set, and the curtain rose on Act 3 of Cleopatra's grand saga, a tale where political intrigue and personal ambition collided with all the subtlety of a chariot crash. Enter Mark Antony, the Roman general with a penchant for the dramatic and a reputation that walked the fine line between hero and hedonist. With Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, the power vacuum in Rome was as vast as the Sahara, and Cleopatra found herself once again playing the high-stakes game of thrones, in sandals, no less. Now, let's cut through the romantic haze that history loves to paint around Cleopatra and Antony. Sure, their story is often portrayed as a love affair that would make Shakespeare swoon, but the reality was far more calculating. Cleopatra was a queen first and a lover second. Antony was a means to an end, a strategic ally in a world that was rapidly spiraling into chaos. The duo's relationship was less about starry-eyed romance and more about mutual benefit. Think of it as the ancient version of a power couple with less Instagram and more infantry. In the aftermath of Caesar's death, Mark Antony was part of the Second Triumvirate, a ruling alliance with Octavian, Caesar's heir, and adopted son, and Lepidus. This trio was about as stable as a three-legged stool missing a leg. Antony needed Egypt for its wealth, crucial to fund his military campaigns, and Cleopatra needed a Roman protector to keep her throne secure and her kingdom prosperous. So, when Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus in 41 BC, it was as much a business meeting as it was a personal rendezvous. Cleopatra's entrance to this meeting is the stuff of legend. She sailed up the Cydnus River in a barge bedecked with purple sails and oars of silver, reclining under a canopy of gold, dressed as Aphrodite herself. Subtle, right, but this wasn't just a display of wealth. It was a power move, showcasing Egypt's affluence and her own command over it. Cleopatra knew that in a world dominated by Roman austerity, a bit of opulence could go a long way in winning Antony's favor, and win it she did. Their alliance was sealed with a personal partnership that would send ripples through the Roman world. Let's talk logistics, shall we? Cleopatra's Egypt was the economic powerhouse of the ancient world, and Antony had grand ambitions for conquest that required deep pockets. The economic arrangement between them was as crucial as any romantic entanglement. Cleopatra provided Antony with financial backing, including ships and troops, for his ill-fated Parthian campaign. In return, Antony recognized Cleopatra's children as legitimate heirs, ensuring her dynastic ambitions had a fighting chance. And then there was the matter of the infamous donations of Alexandria in 34 BC, a political stunt that would make the Roman Senate clutch their togas in horror. Antony, in a ceremony that was half political theater, half royal decree, distributed territories to Cleopatra and her children, essentially carving out a mini-empire for her brood. This move was a direct affront to Rome's authority, challenging their control over these regions and setting the stage for the ultimate showdown between Antony and Octavian. The donations were more than just a land grab. They were a bold declaration that Cleopatra and Antony were playing for keeps. Antony's Roman rivals saw it as the ultimate betrayal, a sign that he was under Cleopatra's spell, though it was more likely he was under the influence of Egypt's Caphos. This act of defiance was one of many that led to the deterioration of Antony's relationship with Octavian, culminating in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Now, the Battle of Actium wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a clash of ideologies. On one side, you had Octavian, the embodiment of Roman order and tradition. On the other, Cleopatra and Antony, representing the opulent, exotic East. Their naval forces met in the Ionian Sea, and the outcome would determine the fate of the Roman world. Historians love to debate why Cleopatra and Antony ultimately lost this battle. Was it indecision, betrayal, poor strategy? Maybe all three, but suffice it to say, Octavian's forces emerged victorious, marking the beginning of the end for Cleopatra's reign. In the aftermath of Actium, Cleopatra's and Antony's fortunes dwindled faster than politicians' approval ratings after a scandal. They retreated to Alexandria, where they would make their final stand. But that's a story for another day. For now, what's important is understanding the depth of Cleopatra and Antony's partnership, not just as lovers, but as political players who dared to challenge Rome's supremacy. Their story is a testament to the power of ambition and the peril of hubris. Cleopatra was no mere seductress. She was a ruler who used every tool at her disposal to protect her kingdom and her legacy. Antony, for all his faults, was a general who saw in Cleopatra a partner worthy of his ambitions. Together, they created a narrative that continues to captivate our imaginations, reminding us that history is never as simple as it seems. As we prepare to step into the final acts of Cleopatra's life, remember this. The sands of time may obscure the details, but they can't erase the impact of a queen who refused to be just another footnote in history. Cleopatra and Antony's saga was a confluence of politics, economics, and power, wrapped in the allure of romance, a story that still echoes through the ages. Stay tuned, because the finale is just around the corner, and it promises to be as dramatic as the queen herself. As the dust settled on the battlefield of Actium, Cleopatra and Antony found themselves not just licking their wounds, but practically drowning in them. It was September of 31 BC, and the duo was retreating to Alexandria with the same level of enthusiasm you'd have for a dentist appointment. Their defeat was more than just a military setback. It was a tectonic shift in the power dynamics of the ancient world. Octavian's victory wasn't just about boats and soldiers. It was the Roman Empire's coming-out party, and Cleopatra and Antony were decidedly not on the guest list. Now, let's talk about the brutal reality Cleopatra faced back in Egypt. Running a kingdom post-defeat is like trying to host a dinner party in a storm inside a cardboard box. The economic impact of losing at Actium was staggering. Cleopatra's treasury, which once sparkled like a jewelry store window, was now emptier than a toga party the morning after. Military defeats are expensive, and Egypt's coffers were starting to echo with the sound of drachmas not clinking. But Cleopatra wasn't the type to curl up and binge-watch tragedies. Instead, she tried to wield diplomacy like a seasoned poker player with a hand full of aces. Her first move: extend an olive branch, or maybe a fig leaf, to Octavian. Cleopatra sent him a message, likely wrapped in layers of charm and promises, hoping to negotiate a kind of peace that involved keeping her kingdom and her neck intact. But Octavian, ever the pragmatist, wasn't buying what Cleopatra was selling. He had his eyes on Rome's prize, a unified empire under his rule, with Cleopatra's Egypt as a garnish on his political platter. The Roman propaganda machine, ever the master of spin, was working overtime. Cleopatra wasn't just a defeated queen. She was painted as an exotic villain, the very embodiment of the dangerous, seductive East that Rome loved to hate. Her image was weaponized, a tool to justify Octavian's campaign as a noble mission to save Rome from the clutches of a foreign temptress. Cleopatra was cast in the role of the antagonist, and boy, did they milk it for all it was worth. Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra found herself grappling with the logistics of a crumbling kingdom. The economy was a mess, her troops were demoralized, and the locals weren't exactly thrilled with the prospect of another Roman takeover. But let's not underestimate Cleopatra's resilience. She was still strategizing, perhaps clinging to the hope that she could pull a diplomatic rabbit out of her headdress. In those final days, every decision was a high-stakes gamble, with Cleopatra trying to outmaneuver Octavian in a game where the odds were stacked like a Roman legion. Antony, meanwhile, was having his own crisis. Defeat at Actium had tarnished his reputation more than a scandalous scroll, and his allies were dropping off faster than fruit flies at a vineyard. As his fortunes waned, Antony found himself increasingly isolated, his once loyal supporters now looking to cozy up to the rising sun of Octavian's power. Loyalty in politics is often as flimsy as a papyrus sheet. The climax of this tragic saga came in 30 BC, as Octavian advanced toward Alexandria with the steady march of inevitability. Cleopatra and Antony's options dwindled to a few desperate measures. Their final days were marked by a poignant mix of defiance and despair. In a last-ditch effort, Cleopatra reportedly considered fleeing to India, but the logistics of such a journey were as daunting as the thought of facing Octavian. Antony, in a moment of mistaken belief that Cleopatra had already taken her own life, chose to fall on his sword, a dramatic exit befitting a man who had lived his life on the edge of blade. Cleopatra, however, was very much alive, and the news of Antony's death hit her like a chariot crash. With Antony gone, Cleopatra was left to face Octavian alone. In her final act, Cleopatra attempted one last negotiation with Octavian, possibly hoping to secure a future for her children or maintain some semblance of her legacy. But Octavian was as unyielding as a Roman column. He wanted Egypt, and he wanted it without its queen. Cleopatra, understanding that her days were numbered and unwilling to be paraded through Rome as a trophy of war, chose to end her life on her own terms. The popular tale of Cleopatra's death by snakebite, an asp concealed in a basket of figs, has all the makings of a sensational story. But whether it was truly an asp or another method remains one of history's enduring mysteries. What we do know is that on August 10, 30 BC, Cleopatra exited the stage of history with the same dramatic flair that had defined her life. Octavian, having secured Egypt, returned to Rome as the sole ruler of the Roman world, later becoming Augustus, the first emperor. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Egypt's transformation into a Roman province, a transition that would forever alter the cultural and political landscape of the ancient world. In the end, Cleopatra's story is one of ambition, intelligence, and the relentless pursuit of power in a world where the margins for error were as thin as papyrus. Her legacy is a testament to the complexities of leadership, the power of myth, and the enduring allure of a queen who refused to fade quietly into the annals of history. Cleopatra may have lost the throne, but in the grand tapestry of time, she won something far more enduring, an indelible place in the collective imagination of the world. And so, with Cleopatra's exit stage left, the curtain fell on one of history's most captivating dramas. The queen's death wasn't just the end of a reign, it was the closing act of an entire era. With Cleopatra gone, Octavian wasted no time in annexing Egypt, officially bringing it under Roman rule in 30 BC. Think of it as a hostile corporate takeover, but instead of stark options, Octavian got a country with a rich cultural history and a strategic location that made military generals drool. Now, let's get down to brass tacks. What did this annexation mean for Egypt? Economically, Egypt was like the ancient world's ATM, doling out grain and gold to anyone with the right Roman credentials. The Nile's fertile banks were the breadbasket of the empire, feeding Rome's insatiable hunger with more efficiency than a modern-day fast food chain. Octavian knew that to control Egypt was to control a significant portion of the Mediterranean's food supply, and he wasn't about to let that slip through his imperial fingers. Culturally, however, the annexation was a seismic shift. The Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, and while they were about as Egyptian as a kebab shop in Athens, they had maintained a semblance of the old pharaonic traditions. With Rome at the helm, these traditions began to erode. Roman culture seeped into every facet of Egyptian life, like a red wine stain on a white toga. Temples that once echoed with the chants of Egyptian priests now played host to the Latin language, and the once proud Egyptian nobility found themselves playing second fiddle to Roman officials. But let's not paint the Romans as cultural bulldozers. They were more like cultural renovators, mixing their traditions with the local customs to create a new cultural blend. The famed Egyptian art and architecture, with its imposing sphinxes and towering obelisks, found new patrons in Roman emperors who were eager to showcase their power through grand projects. Cleopatra's capital, Alexandria, remained a hub of learning and innovation, a testament to the city's resilience and adaptability. Yet, for all its grandeur, the Roman Empire wasn't immune to the pitfalls of bureaucracy and economic strain. The cost of maintaining a province as vast and wealthy as Egypt was enormous, and the Roman tax collectors were as relentless as the desert sun. Local farmers found themselves squeezed tighter than a grape in a wine press, their crops funneled into the empire's coffers while they struggled to make ends meet. It was a stark reminder that even in the greatest of empires, there was always a price to pay. Now, let's pivot to Cleopatra's legacy. Her image was reshaped over the centuries like clay in a sculptor's hands. The Romans, ever the masters of narrative control, painted her as a dangerous siren who led men astray, an exotic femme fatale who threatened the very fabric of Roman masculinity. This myth, while captivating, was about as accurate as a tabloid headline. Cleopatra was a shrewd politician who used her intelligence and charisma to navigate the treacherous waters of ancient geopolitics. Fast forward a few centuries, and Cleopatra's story found new life in the works of Renaissance artists and playwrights. Shakespeare, ever the dramatist, immortalized her in Antony and Cleopatra, a theatrical tour de force that cemented her status as a tragic heroine. In Shakespeare's hands, Cleopatra became the archetype of the passionate, doomed lover, a narrative as intoxicating as a goblet of ancient Egyptian wine. But let's not get swept away by the romance. Cleopatra's story is a complex tapestry of ambition, power, and survival. She was a woman ruling in a man's world, a queen who dared to challenge the might of Rome. Her realpolitik approach to leadership, while sometimes overshadowed by the myths of seduction, was the mark of a ruler who understood the nuances of power. As we peel back the layers of Cleopatra's legacy, we're left with a portrait that's both inspiring and cautionary. Her life is a testament to the timeless dance between power and perception, a reminder that history is as much about the stories we tell as the facts we record. Cleopatra may have lost her throne, but she gained something far more enduring, a place in the collective imagination, a symbol of resilience and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. So, as we conclude this journey through the sands of time, remember this. Cleopatra was more than just a queen with a penchant for drama. She was a strategist, a mother, a lover, and above all, a survivor. Her story, like so many in the annals of history, is a blend of fact and fiction, myth and reality. And perhaps that's what makes her legend so enduring. Cleopatra's life may have ended in tragedy, but her legacy is a triumph of the human spirit, a testament to the power of ambition, intelligence, and the eternal allure of a story well told. You stand on the edge of a vast, frozen expanse where the sun plays peekaboo for half the year. Welcome to the Arctic, where the Inuit have been outsmarting Mother Nature for millennia. Now, if you think a winter commute is tough, try navigating a landscape where temperatures can plummet to a bone-chilling -40 degrees Celsius. That's the kind of cold that makes your teeth shiver just thinking about it. The Inuit, however, are not ones to let a little frostbite cramp their style. Their survival in such a brutal climate is no accident. It's a masterclass in adaptation, innovation, and sheer tenacity. Let's set the scene. No supermarkets, no central heating, and definitely no fleece-lined parkas from the local mall. Instead, the Inuit turned the Arctic's challenges into their greatest assets. Take the igloo, for example. It's not just a heap of snow blocks, it's a marvel of engineering. Picture this, a dome-shaped refuge built entirely from compacted snow, with an entrance tunnel that keeps out the wind and retains heat, all while being constructed in a matter of hours. The clever design uses the snow's insulating properties to keep the interior surprisingly toasty, relatively speaking. We're talking about temperatures just above freezing, but when it's -40 outside, that's practically a sauna. And then there's the resourcefulness with animal skins. The Inuit didn't just wear them, they wore them wisely. Sealskin was the fabric of choice, not just for its waterproof qualities, but also for its flexibility and warmth. You might think this was just a fashion statement, but it was survival couture. Layered clothing, with the fur side in, trapped heat and allowed for ventilation, a crucial feature when your everyday activities include hunting seals or building more igloos. Let's not forget the kayak, the sleek and silent vessel that made hunting a breeze, or at least as breezy as hunting in icy waters can be. This ingenious craft, made from a frame of driftwood and covered in sealskin, was perfect for sneaking up on unsuspecting prey. It's a stealth machine, designed to glide over the water without a sound, much like your cat when it's plotting mischief. But why all this fuss about survival? Because in a place like the Arctic, it's not just about living, it's about thriving. The Inuits' intimate knowledge of their environment and their ability to exploit every resource available to them was not simply about getting by. It was about creating a life that was rich and full, even in a landscape that seems determined to test every limit. Let's tackle a myth while we're here. The romanticized notion that the Inuit are somehow at one with nature in a way that's beyond the rest of us. Sure, they have a profound respect for their environment, but that's because it's their lifeline. This isn't about living in harmony with nature for its own sake. It's about knowing that if you don't respect the Arctic, it'll eat you for breakfast. Literally. The Inuit survival skills weren't just born from necessity. They were honed over generations. This wasn't a trial-and-error approach. It was an accumulation of knowledge passed down through stories, teachings, and hands-on experience. And it mattered because every piece of information, whether it was about the behavior of seals or the best way to build an igloo, could mean the difference between life and death. So, the next time you're grumbling about the snow outside your window, spare a thought for the Inuit. They didn't just survive the Arctic. They conquered it with ingenuity, adaptability, and a deep understanding of their environment. It's a testament to human resilience and a reminder that sometimes the harshest conditions bring out the very best in us. And that, my friend, is a story worth remembering. Now, let's talk about what it takes to fuel the human machine in such an inhospitable realm. Welcome to the Inuit feast, where the menu isn't just survival, it's a masterclass in culinary strategy. First up, let's dispel the myth of the Eskimo diet as some magical, heart-healthy regimen. Sorry, but this isn't the Arctic version of a Mediterranean diet. The Inuit diet is high in fat and protein, low in carbohydrates, and crucially, it works because of the unique environment and lifestyle, not because it's some secret to longevity that you can package and sell at Whole Foods. For the Inuit, the seal is more than just a meal. It's a multitasking masterpiece. Seal meat is rich in protein and fat, essential for keeping the body running in temperatures that could freeze a pizza in minutes. But wait, there's more. The blubber is not just a calorie goldmine. It's also used for fuel, lighting up a Nuna oil lamp to provide warmth and light. And the skins, they make the waterproof, windproof clothing that's the Arctic's answer to Gore-Tex. Talk about getting mileage out of your groceries. Then there's the whale, the oceanic behemoth that adds serious heft to the pantry. Muktuk, or whale skin and blubber, is a delicacy rich in vitamin C and D, nutrients you can't exactly get from a winter stroll in the Arctic sun. The bones and baleen aren't wasted either. They're transformed into tools and art. It's the ultimate zero-waste lifestyle, long before it was a hashtag. Fish, particularly Arctic char and salmon, are another staple when the sea isn't frozen solid. High in omega-3 fatty acids, they help keep the heart ticking and the brain sharp. And let's face it, you need all the cognitive horsepower you can get when tomorrow's breakfast might involve dodging a polar bear on the way to the fishing hole. But before you start romanticizing this as some kind of paleo paradise, remember the reality. This isn't a choice, it's a necessity. The Inuit diet evolved out of sheer need to extract every ounce of sustenance from the available environment. It's a testament to human ingenuity under pressure, not a lifestyle choice for the faint-hearted. And unlike some fad diets, it's not about cutting carbs for a beach body. It's about surviving where the beach is a block of ice. Let's delve into the logistics. Hunting isn't a leisurely weekend activity, it's a full-time job. Imagine setting out in sub-zero temperatures, armed with nothing but a kayak and a harpoon, knowing that your family's next meal depends on your skill and luck. The economic context is stark. In a land where opportunities are as scarce as the daylight in winter, every successful hunt is both a paycheck and a grocery run. This brings us to another myth, the idea that the Inuit are somehow isolated from the rest of the world. On the contrary, they've traded goods like furs and ivory with outsiders for centuries. These exchanges brought metal tools and firearms, revolutionizing hunting practices. It's a reminder that even in the most remote corners of the earth, human societies are interconnected in ways that are both complex and surprising. Now, if you think about the social fabric, food is more than nourishment. It's the glue that holds the community together. Sharing a catch isn't just about generosity. It's about survival for the group. In a place where cooperation can mean the difference between life and death, communal feasting strengthens bonds and ensures everyone gets through the winter intact. So, next time you're cozily sipping your hot chocolate, think about the Inuit pulling a seal from the icy depths, transforming it into a meal, a lamp, a coat. It's a level of resourcefulness and resilience that's both awe-inspiring and humbling. And while the romance of this life might capture our imaginations, it's the reality, the grit and the grind, that truly tells the story of survival in the Arctic. All right, you've got your hot chocolate in hand, and we're about to dive into the heart of Inuit social life. If you thought surviving the Arctic was all about grit and seal blubber, buckle up, because the real secret weapon, it's the people. Yup, the same folks you might have imagined isolated and stoic, surrounded by nothing but icy wilderness, were actually part of tight-knit communities where each connection was a lifeline. Let's peel back the layers on those communal bonds. First off, the Inuit didn't just survive in groups, they thrived because of them. Imagine you're huddled in an igloo with your family, wind howling outside, temperatures nosediving, and you realize that your neighbor's success on a hunt is just as crucial to your survival as your own. It's a bit like a life-sized game of survival Jenga. Pull one piece out, and the whole thing could come crashing down. Inuit society was deeply collaborative, with each member playing a role as vital as the next. Got a knack for hunting? Great, you're the one bringing home the proverbial bacon, or in this case the seal. More of a storyteller. Perfect, you're the keeper of traditions, passing down crucial survival knowledge through tales spun around a crackling fire. These stories weren't just for entertainment, though they certainly helped pass the long, dark hours of the Arctic night. They were the original TED talks, packed with life lessons, cultural values, and even a bit of humor to keep spirits high when the thermometer dipped. Now, let's talk about family, the glue that held everything together. In the Inuit world, family wasn't just mom, dad, and 5 kids. It was an expansive network of relatives, each one a thread in a tapestry of survival. During those bone-chilling winters, extended families often huddled together in shared spaces, pooling resources and support. That kind of intimacy, it was both practical and nurturing, ensuring that everyone had a role and a place. It was socialism by necessity, not by choice, because in the Arctic, going it alone was not an option. And speaking of roles, let's not forget the elders and shamans. These weren't just wise old folks sitting around dispensing sage advice, like some kind of Arctic Yoda. Elders were the walking encyclopedias of Inuit culture, holding the keys to centuries of accumulated wisdom. They knew every nook and cranny of the land, every nuance of the weather, every trick for coaxing life from a frozen landscape. In a place where a wrong decision could cost you your life, their guidance was invaluable. Shamans, on the other hand, played a more, let's say, mystical role. They were the spiritual guides and healers, bridging the gap between the physical and the supernatural. In a world where the veil between life and death was thin, shamans offered a sense of control over the uncontrollable. Whether it was healing the sick or interpreting dreams, their influence was woven into the fabric of daily life. And while we might raise an eyebrow at their methods today, they provided essential psychological comfort in an unpredictable world. Here's where we bust another myth. The notion that these social structures and practices are relics of a bygone era, irrelevant in today's Inuit communities. The truth: these age-old traditions have evolved, but remain central to Inuit identity. Modern Inuit still rely on storytelling to connect with their past, elders to guide their future, and communal ties to navigate the complexities of the present. In fact, Inuit social structures were so robust that they could absorb change and innovation without losing their essence. When contact with outside cultures brought new tools and technologies, the Inuit adapted, weaving these novelties into their existing framework without unraveling their social fabric. It's a lesson in resilience and adaptability that many contemporary societies could take to heart. So, while it's easy to romanticize the Inuit as noble savages, living in harmony with nature and each other, the reality is far more nuanced. Their survival was a testament to human ingenuity, not just in terms of technology, but in the art of living together, supporting one another, and finding strength in unity. It's a reminder that sometimes the toughest conditions bring out the best in humanity, challenging us to build bonds that are both practical and profound. As we wrap up this chapter, remember, the Arctic might be a land of extremes, but it's also a landscape shaped by human hands and hearts. The Inuit didn't just endure. They crafted a life rich in culture, community, and cooperation. And that's a story that warms the soul even more than your hot chocolate can. As the fire crackles and the shadows dance across the igloo's walls, you might wonder what kept the Inuit not just alive, but thriving in the face of such relentless adversities. Beyond their communal spirit and culinary resourcefulness, it was their knack for invention that truly set them apart. So, grab your metaphorical toolkit and let's dive into the world of Inuit technological brilliance. First stop, the kayak. Before you imagine a leisurely paddle down a serene river, remember that this sleek vessel was the Arctic's answer to the sports car, designed for precision and stealth. The Inuit perfected the kayak long before recreational paddling became a weekend hobby. Constructed from a lightweight framework of driftwood, bone, or whalebone, and sheathed in watertight sealskin, this marvel of engineering allowed Inuit hunters to glide silently through icy waters. It's the kind of stealth technology that would make even the most advanced military vehicles blush. And why was this silence golden? Because when your next meal is a skittish seal or a quicksilver fish, surprise is your best ally. Fast forward to today, and you'll find the kayak has paddled its way into the hearts of adventure seekers worldwide. But the original Inuit designs were all about survival, not selfies. These vessels were tailored to the unique demands of the Arctic environment, narrow enough to slice through water with ease, yet stable enough to withstand the unpredictable mood swings of northern seas. While modern kayaks might sport fiberglass and polyester, the ingenuity of that original design remains largely unchanged. Talk about a legacy that floats. Speaking of hunting, let's not overlook the harpoon, the Inuits' preferred tool for making a splash in the world of Arctic sustenance. The harpoon was a masterpiece of functionality, capable of turning a day's work into a feast, or a famine if you missed. Crafted meticulously from bone, ivory, and wood, it was the Swiss Army knife of hunting tools. With detachable heads and lines, it was designed to lodge securely into the blubber of seals or whales, keeping the catch tethered until it could be hauled in. It's the kind of multitasking tool that would make even the most advanced fishing rod look like a child's toy. But wait, there's more. The harpoon wasn't just about brute force. It was an exercise in physics. The throwing stick, or atlatl, acted as an extension of the arm, increasing leverage, and consequently, the distance and speed of the harpoon's flight. Think of it as the prehistoric precursor to the javelin throw. And here's a fun fact. The earliest harpoons discovered date back to over 6,000 years ago. That's right. The Inuit were mastering the art of the hunt, while the rest of humanity was still figuring out the wheel. As we dive deeper into Inuit innovation, consider the Kamudiak, the traditional sled that made traversing the icy expanses just a tad more bearable. Built from whalebone or driftwood lashed together with rawhide, these sleds were an engineering response to the harshest of terrains. The Kamudiak's unique design allowed it to flex over uneven surfaces, reducing the risk of breakage. Imagine trying to cross a frozen tundra without roads or paths. These sleds were the four-wheel drives of their day, minus the carbon emissions, and plus a team of eager sled dogs. And about those sled dogs, not just any pups would do. These were the elite athletes of the canine world, bred for strength, endurance, and an uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous Arctic landscape. A well-trained dog team was worth its weight in gold, or seal blubber, at least. The economic and social importance of these dogs can't be overstated. They were as much a part of the community as any human member, with their own place in the social hierarchy. Now, you might be wondering, why all the fuss about ancient tools and technology? Well, because these innovations were nothing short of survival essentials. In an environment where a wrong turn could mean becoming an ice sculpture, every tool, every technique was honed to perfection through generations of trial, error, and triumph. The Arctic didn't offer second chances, so the Inuit made sure not to need them. Let's pause to debunk another myth, the romantic notion that these tools were primitive or simplistic. Far from it. The Inuits' technological prowess was sophisticated, born from an intimate understanding of their environment and a relentless drive to adapt. While the world may have viewed their inventions as quaint or rudimentary, those who dared to venture into the Arctic quickly realized this was innovation born of necessity, not novelty. These tools and techniques didn't just shape the daily lives of the Inuit, they influenced cultures far beyond the Arctic Circle. European explorers, upon encountering the Inuit, were often astounded by the efficiency and ingenuity of their tools. Many adopted these designs, integrating them into their own expeditions. It's a testament to the universal language of genius, one that transcends geography and time. So next time you see a kayak slicing through calm waters or a dog sled racing across a snowy landscape, give a nod to the original innovators. The Inuit's legacy isn't just etched into history, it navigates our world today, reminding us of the power of human ingenuity in the face of nature's harshest tests. And remember, in a world obsessed with the latest gadgets, sometimes the best solutions are those born from the need to survive, rather than the desire to impress. As we leave behind the icy expanse of Inuit invention, keep in mind that their story is far from over. In our next chapter, we'll dive deeper into how these remarkable people continue to adapt and innovate, weaving their ancient wisdom with modern technology to navigate the ever-changing tapestry of the Arctic. Until then, let the spirit of resilience and creativity warm you more than any igloo or sealskin parka ever could. And here we are, standing at the crossroads where ancient wisdom meets the digital age, a place as fascinating as it is daunting. The Inuit have spent millennia mastering the art of survival in the Arctic, but now they face a new set of challenges. We're talking about climate change and globalization, two colossal forces that are shaking the snow globe of traditional Inuit life. Let's start with climate change, the not-so-invisible hand that's rewriting the rules of the Arctic game. The temperature up north is rising nearly twice as fast as the global average. We're talking about over 2 degrees Celsius higher since the 1950. That might not sound like much, but when your lifestyle depends on the ice staying frozen, it's a big deal. The sea ice is retreating faster than your hairline in a midlife crisis, and that spells trouble for hunting and travel. Remember those sleek kayaks and trusty dog sleds? Well, they're only as good as the ice and water beneath them, and both are becoming increasingly unpredictable. Here's a curveball. With the ice melting, new shipping lanes are opening up. Suddenly, the Arctic is no longer just the Inuit's backyard. It's a bustling highway for global trade. This brings both opportunity and peril. On one hand, there's potential for economic growth through new jobs and industries. On the other, the influx of outsiders and industrial activity threatens to disrupt traditional ways and delicate ecosystems. It's like inviting a bull into a china shop, where the china is your livelihood and heritage. Now, throw globalization into the mix. The internet's reach doesn't stop at the Arctic Circle, and Inuit communities are more connected than ever. This access to global culture and markets offers a bridge to broader economic opportunities, but it also brings the risk of eroding traditional practices. The youth are caught between two worlds, one steeped in the wisdom of their ancestors, and the other flashing with the allure of modernity. It's a cultural tug-of-war, with the stakes being nothing less than identity itself. Yet, the Inuit are nothing if not adaptable. Take, for example, the rise of Inuit artists and entrepreneurs who blend the old with the new, creating works that both honor their heritage and appeal to global audiences. This is cultural resilience in action, a testament to the ingenuity that has always defined them. It's about taking the best of both worlds and crafting something uniquely Inuit, like carving a sculpture from a block of ice, shaping it with care and precision. Economically, the Inuit are exploring new avenues like renewable energy and ecotourism. Small-scale solar and wind projects are popping up, harnessing one of the few abundant resources in the Arctic, the wind that could freeze your face off. Ecotourism offers a chance to share their rich culture with the world. And yes, maybe show a few tourists what real cold feels like. No Starbucks lattes in sight. And let's not forget political agency. Inuit voices are increasingly heard on international stages, advocating for their rights and the protection of their homeland. Organizations like the Inuit Circumpolar Council have been instrumental in pushing for policies that address climate change and safeguard traditional territories. It's a reminder that while the Inuit have always been at the mercy of nature, they're not about to let human-made challenges go unchallenged. So, what's the takeaway in all this? The Inuit story is one of resilience, adaptability, and innovation. They've thrived in one of the harshest climates on Earth. And as they face the new world order of climate change and globalization, they're proving that old dogs can learn new tricks, especially when the stakes are survival. It's a narrative that defies simplistic labels and romantic myths, a living testament to the power of human ingenuity and community. In closing, the Inuit are not relics of a bygone era, frozen in time like the landscapes they inhabit. They are dynamic, evolving communities that have much to teach the world about resilience and adaptation. As the Arctic continues to change, so too will the Inuit, crafting a future that honors their past while embracing new possibilities. It's a journey that's far from over, and one that promises to be as unpredictable and resilient as the Arctic itself. So next time you're bundled up in your parka, spare a thought for the Inuit, masters of survival, whose ingenuity and spirit continue to inspire and endure in a world that's anything but static.